to the July 7th special meeting of the Cupertino City Council. Madam City Clerk, can we have the roll call, please?
Councilmember Chow?
Here.
Councilmember Sinks?
Here.
Councilmember Willie?
Here.
Vice Mayor Paul?
Here.
Mayor Sharp?
Here. Okay, so our single item. Let me ask our city attorney, do I need to read every time the public participation?
No, you can just introduce the item.
Okay, wonderful. I think by now everyone is used to this. So we have a study session regarding general plan amendment authorization procedure adopted by the City Council in September 2015 by resolution number 15-078. Attachment A, and the recommended action is that we receive the report and provide direction on any next steps regarding the GPA authorization procedure. So we are ready for the staff report.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can you hear me okay?
Oh, yes.
Perfect, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members. Good evening, Ben Fu, your Director of Community Development. Thank you, Mayor, for the introduction. Let me share my screen here and we can get started. This is the general plan amendment authorization study session. In this presentation, I will be running through some background history and then talking about the pros and cons, and then we will be available to receive your direction. So prior to adoption of resolution 815-085 in 2015, City staff reviewed applications for proposed development projects concurrently with any proposed GPA application and environmental review for the project. Project review included consistency with general plan and evaluation of zoning regulations. Public input about the project was solicited through neighborhood noticing, legal notices, meetings, site signage, and neighborhood meetings. Upon completion of environmental and project review, the public could provide input on the final decision in hearings before Planning Commission and City Council. There were, through the development and the adoption of the process, we heard some community concerns. In 2014, members of the community expressed concerns about the city's processing of project applications and requesting amendments of the general plan because the process did not provide the public with an understanding of the number of GPA applications submitted during the year, did not allow a comparison of projects because applications could be filed anytime, did not provide an opportunity for the city to require projects to compete with each other, which potentially could incentivize developers to design higher quality projects. Also did not provide for a comprehensive view of all the development projects, prevented the city from assessing the impact of all the GPAs on the goals of the city's general plan, didn't permit early enough public input, and also didn't allow the public an opportunity to really comment and influence the projects. In early 2015, staff conducted an online survey on the community benefits and received about 300 validated responses, of which 80% were from Cupertino residents. The survey resulted in more than 65% of respondents supporting a community benefits program. Also, the results show some support that the general plan should limit additional growth and building heights. Developers should provide community benefits or amenities to alleviate adverse impacts of the project for things like transportation and other services, schools, things like that. City staff also researched on how other communities were managing growth and its impacts on quality of life. A white paper was prepared analyzing programs to manage developments in cities of Berkeley, Santa Monica, San Diego, Mountain View, and Morgan Hill. And that document is at the very bottom of the staff report attached to the agenda. Finally, in September 2015, City Council adopted Resolution 15-078 which established the city's policy for GPA authorization process. Currently, the proposed, this slide here lists the current procedure. Currently, I won't read all of it, but right now you submit a GPA application. It's considered twice a year. And the city will, of course, post all documents on the city website. We'll do proper noticing. The council decision then would authorize the submittal of an application. And there's also a second chance should the project be denied or receiving different direction from council. If denied, the project must wait until the next round to resubmit. Here's an illustration of what I just talked about. And I can kind of circle back a little bit later too if you like. But basically it shows on the very top here when the GPA authorization is requested and what happens. You can council will either authorize for the applicant to apply for a GPA, in other words, send an application for review and start the process, or not authorized. And it shows the path for either circumstances. Now here we're going to talk a little bit about the kind of pros and cons of the procedure. Some of the benefits are the process allows the city council and the public to kind of look at a group of projects together and get a better understanding of how the city can develop and should develop. Additional development projects would be able to volunteer some community benefits to mitigate some impacts. The public and also the council would be able to preview these projects during this sort of pre-application design phase. And also, of course, it allows the staff advance notice of the projects to kind of better coordinate resources and time. And finally, of course, it allows city council to provide direction early in the process to both the staff, to the applicant, and also to the public. Here's some of the concerns on the procedures that we've heard. There's 2 slides, about 7 of them. The biggest thing here, obviously, number 1 is this misconception that the city council's authorization for an application automatically means actual approval, which is not true. It just allows the applicant to submit an application to start the review and evaluation process. At the end of that, if you recall my chart, at the end of that, then the council would decide whether you want the project to submit an application or not. And so that's the biggest concern. There's also concern about the community benefits may be inconsistent, be different, may not be comparable, or have a different intended benefits. And that the outreach should be more and earlier. More information on the projects should be submitted. Now, that brings us to what are the options for tonight. This is a study session. We're here to kind of take notes and see what the council will offer and direct us to proceed the next steps. There's some options here we listed. Of course, there may be more, but you can retain the procedure as is now. You can refine it to address some of the concerns I talked about, with concerns that you heard about as well. You can repeal the existing procedure. Just go back to sort of the normal process. Or you can consider some additional methods that we can talk about tonight or listed in a white paper attached. So with that concludes my presentation, and I thank the City Council for receiving the report, and I look forward to some direction.
Okay, wonderful. So can you tell us how many other cities have a gateway process like this?
Sure. Our research showed about 11 cities in 1 county, so 12 jurisdictions.
In the whole state?
From our research, yes.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, personally, originally I thought it was a good idea. I thought, oh, it'll save the staff time if a project that everyone hates doesn't get past the gateway. But from talking to Ben, it seems like it's allowing people to submit incomplete projects we don't even have enough information to make a good decision whether it can get through the gateway or not. And I'm thinking of that project over by Linda Vista Park, for example. So Ben, is it more work or less work for your staff to have the gateway?
That's a really hard question to answer. I think it's more work and less work. I say that because if the procedure is sort of outlined really well and you have to understand what the council really wants, then it is going to be easier because we are given the opportunity to communicate with the applicants early about what's needed. We get direction from city council early, and the applicant knows what to submit when the time comes. So they make the review process a little bit easier and quicker, theoretically. But of course, the challenge is how do you maintain the quality of the submittal, and that's when it gets a little bit difficult for the staff. But I think for us, really, it's up to the council. We can certainly adjust to either direction that you wish to go forward with.
All right. Who else wants to speak on this? Okay.
I would.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Let Rod go first.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, thank you. Well, you know, here's what I noticed before we put this process in place. We have our development department consumed with lots of project applications. We certainly had some public sessions where we were collecting public input, but I think it was really hard because in the formative stages of these projects, I, as a council member, really had no input. It's like, well, you're the decider. You wait till the project is fully formed and then you vote on it. So I found the process frustrating because staff, of course, was empowered to go negotiate, to discuss options to the extent that we had big tools at our disposal, and that would include, there was a reason we didn't refill the office allocation or the hotel room allocation when we could have. Staff initially wanted to do that, and I said, it seems to me like when we have big tools to negotiate with, we ought to retain that control. So to just let staff go off and cut deals and do things out of the public light generally, I didn't think was a great process. And I also saw that things that we might really projects that we might really care about were getting bogged down because we just didn't have enough staff at the time. So I was a big proponent of this because it allowed us at the council to elevate the discussion, right? To make it more visible to the public, to provide greater transparency. And in doing so, hear from the public, get views of individual council members to help guide staff's priorities. The last thing I wanted was, and I still wouldn't want, is a process where, we took all applications and we had to treat them all seriously to wind them all the way up to a planning commission in some cases process and or a council process as a final decision where we'd had really no organized opportunity in a public forum to weigh in. So I think the benefit of this is project applications can be as incomplete as they want. They can come in, but it's a way of, the process we have is a way of testing whether, individual council members think this is a worthy thing to enter our development department and have a serious review. Some of these projects, right, go on, they sit in planning for years because they're that big. And then, have an opportunity to hear what public might think about this early on before we get to, years of hard work, negotiation, and never having brought the thing to council. So I think that's the virtue of the process. I would also say that, very often development projects come in and we are underwater. We don't get the public dollars we need to fund all of the infrastructure, and I mean that broadly, the infrastructure to run our city, to maintain its streets, to do whatever we think, or the council thinks priorities ought to be. And the reason to withhold office allocation and hotel allocation is so that we have a big enough tool to have a serious negotiation with a developer that wants something from us, right? So that's the reason. It's not because we want to have a variance everywhere. We want to do something different. We could say we're going to allow X more office squares and hotel rooms as part of our next general plan. You all can do that. The problem with that is then you lose a lot of discretion over saying no, or no unless we get this instead, right? So without getting into any specific projects, I would say that what this system has facilitated effectively, I think, is a discussion and, yeah, real contributions that we got from various projects as part of their going through the gateway process, and gave more certainty to developers about whether council members were going to generally be in favor or not, and an opportunity for the public to be heard at our most senior forum, which is the city council. So that's why I've liked this process. I do think the main points are transparency, better leverage in negotiation, and early buy-in so that everybody has some expectation as this goes through the planning department. And given a paucity of planners, I think we're still very much in the mode of needing to be careful about how we use our city's planning resources. That's it. Thanks.
Okay, Councilmember Chow, you have your hand raised.
Hi. First, I'd like to clarify what exactly was the normal process before 2015. Staff report says that the development project would be submitted concurrently with any proposed general plan amendment application. But when I got involved in 2014, many other residents who have been deeply involved in the city, attending city council meetings, they told me the normal process for Cupertino was all the projects have to comply with the general plan, period. There was no general plan amendment application process. Could the staff please clarify that? It seems there is a different understanding of what's normal.
I'm going to ask Pew Gosha, our planning manager, to respond to that. I haven't been here long enough to go back that far. As far as I recall, there's always an opportunity to seek general plan.
So which project did receive general plan amendment under this so-called normal process?
I would have to research that, ma'am, but it is my understanding that there have been projects that have applied. They would just come in with general plan amendment, and the proponent would just propose a project which would include a general plan amendment, and the city would just go ahead and process it. And if I'm not mistaken, the city center project might be one of them, but I have to research that information to get you accurate information.
Okay, because as far as I know, I read the last version of the general plan that was, I think, approved in 2010. And then there were amendments to that. And the amendment there was never specific project size amendment except Apple. But Apple project was it was an amendment for any design standard. It was amendment because they purchased a public road. Then we had to rezone that road. That was the only one.
Actually, thank you for reminding me. In 2009, there was another general plan amendment that Apple proposed to change the land use of one of the properties that they had purchased from residential to industrial, I believe. So there was something that they had proposed back in 2009.
So we didn't really have a process, it was more ad hoc.
People would just come in and propose a general plan amendment, and staff would review it and bring a recommendation for the council.
But I think most understanding was that projects should just comply with the general plan, right? It was not like an understanding of, okay, we will consider. Because
If a project proponent brought a project in that included a general plan amendment, we would just process it. But there is no way that the city could turn away an applicant that proposed a general plan amendment. We would have to, if they brought an application in, we would have to process it.
So the last time was 2009, probably?
Quite possibly, yes.
So it happens very infrequently.
Again, I'd have to look back to see to go over the list of general plan amendments that happened before the new procedure went into place.
Yeah, good. So I think thank you for a very excellent staff report. You guys did a lot of research, and the last attachment has links to this process that's done in every city. That's a very great resource to look at. And I think the intent originally for this, there was good intention, but I'm not. So, for example, yeah, we realized that with a lot of projects coming in, the city have to be on the hook for providing the infrastructure. However, I don't think that's part of the scope of this GPA, because community benefits were beyond infrastructure. If we would like development project to support infrastructure, we should build in that in our either development impact fee or any conditional approval conditions, so that infrastructure cost is included in every project, whether they request a general plan amendment or not. So I think that's a good point, but then that shouldn't be addressed by this process. And then as for early outreach, I think that's a very good point too, that now that I'm on the council, I find out a lot of things would have been going on maybe for 1 or 2, even 2 years. And the council wouldn't see until it's on our table, and then we have on the dais, and then we have to make a final decision on something that have been being negotiated for years, maybe not years, but months. So the intention was to provide an early process so that the council could be involved in decision that eventually will need council approval, like general plan amendment. And I think the same thing should apply to any density bonus projects too, because these projects essentially amend general plan without general plan amendment. And so we need early notification to the council and the public about what kind of waiver exception these kind of projects are requesting. And then I think it will be good to provide feedback to the developers so that they can propose projects that meet the community needs. So maybe this is something that should be considered for all projects that will not comply with the general plan one way through either state law or the amendment process. I think we need that. And then in terms of how we might want to modify the current one, I think many people this kind of process is not done in most cities, because this concept is considered spot zoning. Spot zoning means you rezone one site outside of general plan process, which should be done every 10 or 20 years. And that's a better way to develop a city, way to overall plan for the entire city every 10 or 20 years, and then do a full outreach, what do we want the city to be, and then we rezone and plan for that. And then if the individual request should fall within that plan, if they want to be out of that plan, it should be strongly discouraged. I think that was the intent. However, the consequence we have from the 2015 general plan amendment was there was very little hotel allocation. So we had one amendment that the only thing they are requesting is extra hotel allocation. It seems that even this process is adding a burden to that kind of simple request. I'm not sure. And then, yeah, the other is a more major request that we did grant higher height but then we were able to negotiate some more community benefits. But I think the original intent of this process was, I remember I attended the meeting at the time, the council was admiring the process in Mountain View when LinkedIn was competing with Google, I think, for one specific office allocation amount, because there is only one thing there, the two of them both want, so they have to compete. But in our process, there is no competition because there is not one thing that we are holding and multiple participants could compete for. Everyone comes in, they are just asking for what they want for their own site. That's not the competition process. So if we envision this might be something we would like to encourage better projects to come forward, maybe we can consider that we will have a limited amount of hotel allocation, let's say, for the next 5 years. And then people who want it should come and compete for that. Or we would have a limited amount of office allocation for the next 5 years. And people who want that allocation would have to come submit a project that's really attractive, so we would grant that. The only way to have a good competition is when you have limited quantity of something for them to compete for. That's just my thought. Okay.
Okay, John, did you want to weigh in?
Sure. So, my number one focus is, what do the residents really think about how things get done in our community? And I'm still fresh, as far as I'm concerned, fresh in knocking on doors and talking to residents and hearing that they're not part of the process, hearing that projects are already approved. How many hours did I spend trying to convey to residents, no, the project isn't approved yet? And even when I tell them that, they're not sure that I'm correct. So to me, the number one factor is the residents. What can we do to ensure that the residents are part of the decisions of their community? And that's where I really have heartburn with this process. When you give an approval, whatever that approval means, whether it's an authorization or it's a level 1 approval or something else, it's going to be seen as something that the person wants it to see. The developers, when they get that authorization, well, okay, they can start letting down their guard. They can start reducing how much they might have to ante up to the community and things like that. The authorization to the community, well, it's already been approved. And again, I can't say enough how many people that I tried to convince things were not approved yet. And with that being said, I definitely am in favor of maximum resident engagement, maximum community participation. I'd like the message of the city to be that we are looking for projects that fit the community. The developers should be looking to fit with the community. If they're not thinking that they're community focused, that they just have to convince the city staff or the city council, then we are where we were before we were on the city council, with the residents thinking that things get done and they're not part of the process. So now that we talked about the resident focus, how the residents, how the developers see this process, the current one, any authorization or approval to me is sending a incorrect message to the residents, so that then they essentially say, well, it's been approved, so why should I attend any more city council meetings? Why should I worry? So I'm definitely in favor of that message being to the developers, work with the community. Feel free to come to the city council meeting and present your project as you initially see it, and then solicit the input from the community and take away that information, work to address the things that the community wants and to reduce the things that the community don't want, and come back again. Without us saying, wow, you've got your authorization, and now people start shutting down. If you ask any resident, is there a traffic problem in Cupertino? Absolutely. Is there a density problem in Cupertino? Yes, there is. It's not, the community was never the way it was when they first moved here. And the general plan allows growth. And I think we all are okay with growth as it pertains to the community. But those specifics need to be brought up front by the project and shown to the community before any authorization is given. If we have this level of congestion on Dianza Boulevard and there's going to be a project, first and foremost, those impacts need to be shown. Well, if we add this many more workers, if we add this many more housing units, if we add this many more stores and shopping, this is going to be the impact on our roads and stuff. That, to me, needs to be done, if at all possible, and I believe it is possible, up front before we give any authorization. And the community gets to weigh in on it, and they will feel like, I'm going to this city council meeting because I want to hear and participate, because nothing's been decided. Not at the first time the developer came, not at the second time the developer came, not until the residents have a clear majority support for the project do we then take the first steps of saying, okay, an authorization. And so that's where I'm focused, that, you know, it's all about community, it's all about the residents. The developers are going to make money. This, you know, development is a money-making enterprise, and it's just how much. And I think we need to not put the money in front of the community. I think we need to put the communities in front of the developer's quest for his profits, and let him know that we're here to support you. We're here to help you build within the general plan, and we will then be showing the community how it does meet the general plan. And if it doesn't, hey, you know, it's just something the developer's proposing, and as far as we're concerned, it's probably not going to fly because it doesn't follow the general plan. So that's where I'm at. I just really have a problem with this whole process. I had to answer to it too many times on too many front doorsteps. Yep. Thank you.
Okay, Darcy.
Yeah, can we just hear the public comments first?
Oh, sure. Let me see. I thought, okay, let me go to that. We have 6 attendees and 3 people wish to speak. Okay, Peggy Griffin, you can go first. You have 3 minutes.
Can you hear me?
We hear you.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Sharp, Vice Mayor Paul, council members and staff. I have mixed feelings on this process. I agree with Councilmember Sinks that before this, we had no visibility. The project would be a done deal, planned and everything, and all the negotiations in the background had been done. And then it was presented to the public. And that felt like deals had already been made. So I didn't like that process. This process gives the public more visibility and some negotiation room, but once it's approved, the authorization is approved, it feels like a done deal. And people say, no, 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 it can be turned down, but would the council members have the guts to turn it down? It also doesn't have a clear what's substantially the same, how much can they change from authorization to the real thing. It doesn't define exactly what's required, like the minimum presentation material. And like somebody said, you know, one of them's real detailed and the other one is so vague you don't know what you're really getting. So it's not consistent. And the application deadlines were kind of squishy. So I kind of like Councilmember Willie's suggestion of possibly, and this process also encourages GPAs because you have them every 6 months. It's no big deal to apply for another one. So I don't like that feeling. I like the follow the rules and limit the exceptions. So maybe something along the lines of Councilman Willie's suggestion of if they're normal process, but if it's one that requires a GPA, then maybe they should start presenting it to the council along the way and the planning commission along the way to get feedback. I kind of like that because that doesn't give you the impression that it's a done deal, but I don't know how you get community benefits in that type of process. But I think that would be a better way to encourage developers to follow our GP. Anyway, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Peggy. Next, we have Mooney. Welcome, Mooney.
Hello.
Hi, Mooney. Welcome. Go.
Yeah, thank you. So, thank you, Mayor and Vice Mayor and the City Council for putting this on agenda. My apologies on the noise. I'm on Cupertino Expressway biking, so bear with the noise. This is something that, I complained around 2017 that we need to revisit this process because it's a flawed process on multiple angles. One, we are one of the 12 cities in entire California that have this kind of a process that tells, we are inviting shitload of developers around the world, come and, destroy our city with their investments. Everybody wants to make money. As Councilman John Willie said, everybody wants to make money. If I'm a real estate investor, I would pick one of those 12 cities to invest because I know there is a process that allows me to maximize my profits. So we need to get out of that mode. And two, it puts enormous burden on the residents because twice a year, the GPA process, and then they have 1 month, to come back with a revised process. So 4 times residents have to show up if they have a concern, right? So and then it creates enormous work on the planning staff because they have to go through, review this process. And developers, they don't care. They just want to, submit a thing. And, if it doesn't work, then, they want to submit another one. It creates enormous burden for the staff and the residents. And I agree with, other speakers. Residents feel that, we are being cut, we are experiencing a death by 1,000 paper cuts, right? Because there is so many steps in the process and people feel like, you know what, this thing is a done deal. And people tell now, the guys that are involved in this process, like, planning commissioners and all that, they say, oh, no, it will get, approved by council later on, wait until then, but then you show up there, then they say, oh, it's already, done deal, so you are too late to the party, right? We got to create a simple process, general plan, hold everybody to the general plan. We want to make an exception, give them one chance to come back with an exception. And I think, Councilman Liang said, prior to this process, there was only one GPA. After this process went into place, how many GPA requests we got? That itself sheds the light on, how big of a problem this is. Please get back to basics, protect our city from overdevelopment. Thank you.
Okay, next we have Lisa Warren.
Hi. So as usual, I agree with Peggy's comments, and I agree. When this came into play, I thought it was a good idea. I just have, and I'm not sure it's not a good idea. I just have concerns about whether it's really being done properly, follow the rules that were made are followed properly, one thing, the paper trails, etc. And in addition to that, sorry, Mooney, can you mute yourself?
I'll mute him, that's
okay.
fine, okay.
And, I think the public has a right to have their eyes on these things before. I think it can waste planning's time. I am very, very concerned because it happens even when there's more transparency. There's still stuff happening behind closed doors. And I'm sorry, but it's true. And some of it probably has to be, but it doesn't, decisions don't have to be made based on those deals that are made. And someone commented on, who would dare, after all this time was spent on a project, who would dare say no? Well, I hope people would if it's the wrong thing, if it's a good project in the wrong place, et cetera, et cetera. And the whole notion of community benefits and this bargaining and this, well, you do this and we'll do that, it annoys the heck out of me. And we have a survey from years ago where people don't want community benefits. They didn't have a workshop on input on community benefits with the public because the survey gave planning at that time and our city manager at that time reason to believe it wasn't necessary because they were not putting community benefit language in the general plan, which it's not supposed to be there. It was supposed to be ripped out of everywhere it was. But still people say those two dirty words all the time, and we see over and over again that they don't really pan out. And so I don't know what the solution is. I think it's a hybrid of something perhaps. And as far as people always thinking that it's a done deal, that it's already approved, part of that is from the press. If you go to Westport's website, that they have tons of titles of articles on their projects, on that particular project. And the headlines are all, Cupertino approves, da, 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 da. Unless you read the last sentence or last paragraph of these articles, you don't know that it's really not a done deal. It's very deceiving, very. And they promote those, and I'm sure they help write them. And it's not just KT Urban, it's all of them. And it does not help the community to understand
Okay,
that.
finish up.
Well, I guess I'm done. But I mean, I could read you one. Let me just read.
No, you're out of time. You're over 3 minutes.
Go on the website and read some of them. And some of them have paywalls you can't even get to.
All right, thank you, Lisa.
You're bad.
Next we have someone named Fire. Welcome, Fire.
Okay, hi, this is Jennifer. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Believe me, I'm trying to get used to this tablet now. Yeah, my name's not Fire. I don't know. I'm dumb. I don't know how to use Zoom. Anyway, and it's fun seeing you guys like the Brady Bunch. Anyway, yes, I remember when we were doing the general plan amendment a couple of years ago, and frankly, with all the other things that are going on, I'm really glad we're having this discussion so that it refreshes everyone's mind about why we even had the gateway, the general plan amendment process, I remember sitting through the meetings as developers introduced projects, as projects either worked their way through or they didn't go any further. And yes, like Lisa said, it may be a combination of things. There's good and bad in it. I'm glad Lisa mentioned the community benefits. I remember there was strong aversion to community benefits in this city. In fact, the community benefits makes my skin crawl. I see that term used in other cities, and what it makes me think of is sleight of hand, that residents are being deceived. They don't know what has been given away to developers, like parking reduction, having buildings that are way too tall, having residential that all of a sudden you wake up in the morning and the Taco Bell, Vista Mar, I think it was a taco bar we used to go to in Mountain View, that's going to have like a 10-story building on it in a tiny, Fiesta Del Mar, tiny area footprint. And I bet you half the residents of Mountain View do not have a clue why that building is so big and tall and dense, and it's sitting right next to residential. So yes, the more that I'm hearing of this, it's reminding me of things that we talked about 4, 5, 6 years ago, and we need to keep that discussion on board. And community benefits, in my mind, are not something that we give away in Cupertino. That community benefits really riles a lot of people's sensitivities. So anyway, I'm glad you guys are doing this. I'm getting better at Zoom, and maybe we can reduce parking by having permanent Zoom meetings. Anyway, good luck, everybody, and thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. Now we are on to Kitty Moore. Welcome, Kitty.
All right. Thank you, Mayor. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, great. So I did send in a very brief email stating that the Planning Commission had requested to have the GPA process brought to our commission with an explanation for when we may deny a project because it's very unclear. I agree with Jennifer that the community benefits are, it's a difficult issue. So for instance, we had a recent project come to us which had made it through the gateway. It had some community benefits and various general plan requirements were not going to be met, setback and height and these types of things. And we didn't have any parameters for what we could, say about the project in order, to make a recommendation of denial. And the way it looks when it comes to the Planning Commission is that if it made it through the gateway, you were already happy with the project and that there was really, nothing more for us to say. And if that's not the case, you need to have some policy and procedure for us so that, we know what we can and can't do. And I think that it's not really good for the community to have this gateway project, which gives the appearance, as John Willis said, that something is, it gives the appearance that something's approved when you've made it through the gateway. And we need more direction as the Planning Commission. I think that this meeting probably should have been a joint study session so that if there are any complaints from the Planning Commissioners, that you would be able to hear them and suggestions for how this process can be improved in the future. So I hope that you'll consider continuing this discussion and getting it to the Planning Commission so that we can weigh in, because you're tasking us and not giving us any direction, and that needs to be fixed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kitty.
Mayor, I do have one email to read.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
I do have one email to read.
Okay, welcome, go ahead.
From J.R. Fruin, Mayor Scharf and members of the City Council, the GPA authorization procedure adopted in 2015 provides a strong set of standards that are worthy of maintaining. In particular, I highlight the following. 1, improved transparency in the general plan amendment process. Our community has debated and clashed over how and when the general plan should be amended. By maintaining clear points in the year when these amendments might happen, the public remains better aware of when its input is sought. 2, council remains in the driver's seat. Instead of early input occurring primarily at the staff level, GPA applicants have an open opportunity to see what the policymakers who must ultimately approve or deny a GPA think or want for the community. 3, real opportunities for community benefits to match present needs. By virtue of receiving early input and council input, GPA applicants are better positioned to craft a community benefits package that actually suits community preferences as expressed by the community itself. Today, please take time to examine how this process can be improved. At present, the system is so discretionary that it inhibits application. You can influence that by making the process more flexible and less of a hard barrier to application. The increased bargaining power that the GPA authorization procedure creates nullifies itself if it means that no or very few applicants ever apply. Many thanks, J.R. Fruin, Cupertino resident. And that is all, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. So we'll bring it back. Darcy, you didn't go yet, so go.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I really just have 3 main points. And I think that it's useful to share the framework of my analytical thinking on this subject. And the first is the notion that we're communicating that the public has first and final authority over general plan amendments, if we have them at all. And I think we've done an effective job over the years, now that it has been years that we've had this gateway process. I'm generally neutral as to whether this particular process is something that helps us communicate that message, because my feeling is that the policymakers will be effectuating that policy irrespective of this particular framework that we have right now. So if we didn't have it, what would happen is that if someone had a general plan amendment that they wanted to propose, they would simply propose it. And my initial objection, and I think this passed, I want to say it was a 3-2 vote a few years ago. But my initial objection with this was that it would actually force a set number of meetings a year regarding general plan amendments, whereas prior to that, we didn't necessarily even have one or one a year, or even one every 2 years. That actually was the second part of my framework of thinking about this. And so with regard to the first point, communicating that the public has first and final authority, looking at it from the perspective of not having this process, I think we could do that as well. If you look at the kind of policy-based trend of the composition of our council, it's been, I think, fair to say that irrespective of what framework that you had, if both frameworks were neutral, then the public policy sentiment that we're less encouraging of general plan amendments would have been communicated regardless. And that's why I'm essentially neutral with regard to having this framework in place. But I'm glad that we've communicated the idea that it's not really actively encouraged to try to seek general plan amendments. So going to the second concern that I had, that we would be mandating multiple GPA meetings per year. One thing to keep in mind is that we did have 2 times a year that we're identifying for general plan amendments, but at the same time, baked within this process was the ability of the applicant to go back and repropose some modifications to their proposal at a time, probably roughly 2 or 3 months after their initial general plan amendment was considered. And so breaking the year down into quarters, we would end up essentially having general plan amendment meetings every 3 months. So that was my concern. I thought, if we're going from 1 every year, or 1 every 2 or 3 years even, to 4 that are essentially mandated every year, then that's going to take up a lot of bandwidth. that actually hasn't really been the case. That hasn't borne out over time. And I think that is probably more due to the fact that we have a clear public policy direction as informed by our electorate and reflected by our representatives over the years. So, you know, I think in terms of cutting towards keeping this, that also is not something that would prevent that idea of, well, you know, we're in a steady state right now. You know, we don't really need to get rid of it in order to save time. So I think it's been pretty well maintained in that regard. My final consideration is one based in public policy, and this was you know, alluded to and covered in other council members' comments. But I think you know, when I think about it, I think about this third leg of it in terms of whether we are sending a message out to the public that we're really not that interested in promoting general plan amendments. And I think that this is one that cuts a little bit towards retrenching and perhaps even, you know, taking back the process or perhaps even modifying it. I think it's fair to say that the sentiment on council is that we're really not trying to put forward our general plan as something that is a mechanism for bargaining leverage to obtain things that we feel that our community needs. At the same time, if there are well-considered reasons for requesting a general plan amendment, and we're going on a case-by-case basis, and we're actively and effectively taking in public communication, then I don't see it as something that we should, as an absolute, say that this is not something that we want to do. But, you know, I understand that the kind of tilt of our public policy sentiment is kind of away from that idea of, hey, you know, as a matter of course, you know, we want you to ask for a general plan amendment so that we can bargain in public and get stuff for our community. That's really not something that we're trying to communicate. But again, going back to the first couple of ways that I look at this, I think we've been pretty effective in communicating the idea that we're really not looking to seek out these types of benefits. You know, one thing I do want to say, based upon the last public comment from our chair of the Planning Commission, is that might not be a bad mechanism to consider modifying the process a bit, because our time and bandwidth is pretty valuable in council. We consider a lot of different things. If we're trying to align impacts and let's not necessarily call them, you know, benefits, because that, I think, kind of evokes in some people a sense of, you know, tit for tat, or even, you know, some people go as far as to say, you know, it in some unflattering terminology. But I mean, I think if we're trying to think about the impacts of something that could be very significant, such as to our sewer district, to our, you know, to our various infrastructural needs, then I think that it might be a good idea to add an evaluative step where people are considering these things in an objective and rational manner that would have a little bit more time with regard to our ability to, you know, go over the granular details prior to making a recommendation. So I wouldn't be opposed to that. I mean, I also wouldn't be opposed to cutting the GPA process down to one time a year, for instance, so that we could send the message that, you know, look, we're not closed for the idea of considering that our general plan may not have it right every single time in every single instance. And so we can have a discussion. So maybe we would get somewhat more well thought out proposals along those lines that could align a little bit more accurately with the needs that are being created based upon amendments to our general plan. So those are my ways of thinking about it. Bottom line, I think it cuts towards essentially saying, look, you know, it perhaps wasn't the perhaps wasn't the optimal kind of process for our community to begin with, but I mean, over the years, we have now effectuated it. It hasn't turned out to be, the heavy time resource that I was afraid it might be when it was first proposed. And also, I think the optics of it have been pretty reasonable. We've had some reasonable discussions. Insofar as the transparency discussion is concerned, I don't think it necessarily lends more transparency, because then you could always impose that kind of requirement upon a case-by-case general plan amendment process as well. I think that's really something that is more that falls more upon the public policy makers and their interactions with staff and the public to effectuate, which I think we've done over time. All right, that's it.
You done? Okay, so I have some thoughts here. As far as community benefits, I was not on the council when this whole thing came up. I personally don't like the idea. It's kind of, let us violate your general plan and we'll give you something of questionable value that's worth less than what we're going to make via this GPA. I think if we need the money for the infrastructure, shouldn't be gotten through community benefits. We need to be setting our development fees closer to what our Nexus studies show is necessary to break even. And I think if the public doesn't understand that letting an applicant through the gateway is not the same as approval, then I think we failed in our communication, because that is not true. And we have several times said to an applicant, yeah, your project, it's not bad. We don't like it exactly the way it is, but we'll let you proceed, and we expect all these changes to be made, or we will not give you the final approval. And it may be saving the staff time, it may be saving us time by having that gateway. Like Darcy, I was wary of the whole gateway process, mainly because of the community benefits. And I think we do have the courage to turn down a project, even if it's made it through the gateway and the final project we don't like. We haven't had that many applications. We let 2 hotels go through. One just needed a hotel room allocation. One got some more height and lower setback. But we did negotiate with those applicants to improve the project. We've turned down 3 gateway applications, if I recall correctly, that I've been part of. The Oaks twice, and then one over at Linda Vista. We just decided no. I think for the Oaks, it was we didn't like the office space that was part of the project, because we would have had to, quote, refill the bucket. And while I agreed with that at the time, now looking at what's happening with ABAG and HCD and RENA, I think we thought that, let's not build a lot of office. Let's maintain our jobs housing balance, which is one of the best in Santa Clara County, the second best actually. And then the next time, the next RENA cycle, we're not going to get hit with a big number, because we've been really responsible in maintaining our jobs housing ratio. And it looks like from the calculators that they have up on the ABAG website that idea was not true. It's not going to really help us in our RENA number. They're just going to use other factors, and all these RENA numbers, they're all going to be basically unattainable, but it will make SB 35 kick in sooner, which is probably the goal. And I think if we didn't have the gateway process, we might be having more and longer meetings. I like Darcy's idea of cutting it down to once per year versus once every 6 months. Plus, we could still have a person could modify it slightly and bring it back if they got turned down in that first year meeting. And we are going to have a lot more when we get our next RENA number and start looking at parcels for housing to meet it. We are going to have a lot more, however we do the rezoning, we're going to have to be doing more and, possibly allowing more height just to, we have no choice but to meet that, to create a housing element. I mean, we may not like it. We may know that we're going to do it, and the same thing that's going to happen Next time will be what happened this time. We approve all these housing projects and the developer says, yeah, thanks for approving it, but no, no, we're not going to build. So that, yeah, that's all I have on there. Does anyone else? Rod, yeah, you want to speak again? Go.
Welcome. Okay. Am I unmuted? Thank you. No, I was, at the time, I recall that I thought that in any 6-month cycle, a developer for a project ought to get one bite at the apple, not two. I think Barry wanted to have a repass, but I thought it was just like too much process. And so I think it would be wise to make it less frequent. So if you're doing 2 a year, don't give them a redo immediately. Yeah, you could do 1 a year or 2 a year, but I'll remind you, right, the alternative to not having any general plan amendments having a free-for-all so anybody can apply for a general plan amendment at any time is you'll get them and your staff will have to consider them and process them. We did something somewhat unusual. Yeah, we said we aren't adding any office to our allocation, and Apple took the last of it, as I recall. I think it was Apple. And then we'd used up the whole hotel room allocation, and it was intentional not to refill those. So necessarily, if you're not, and you want to allow any of those things going forward, then you process them by the way of you do that by the way of a general plan amendment. So if you don't like to negotiate and you want hard and fast rules, the alternative is to go back to the old style, and the old style looks like saying, okay, we think the city has room for another umpteen dozen hotel rooms in this, until we do the GP again, and then it's a first come first served thing, right? And you don't necessarily get to critically evaluate the project. If your general plan allows for it, then whoever comes in first can lay claim to the general plan, and the city staff timestamps them. So I think there is some benefit to the process we have, and I appreciate my colleagues listening to me, listening to my experience, even though we may have different points of view at times.
So would you be okay with going down to once per year from twice per year?
Yeah, I would be fine with that.
Okay. I see Liang, you have your hand raised. Go.
Yeah. Hi. First, I have a question, then a comment. A question is, do we charge any fee for the GPA application because it does take staff time?
Ben? Has Ben gone?
Sorry, yeah, no, I'm here.
Right.
You want to talk about the fee structure?
Right, yeah. Do you have to pay to submit to go through the gateway process?
Yes, so the fee is charged based on staff time and materials. So the applicant bears the cost of everything, including the citywide postcard that is mailed out.
All right, great.
So if they will submit in 1 month or modify any time, they will be charged for, we recover all the fees.
We recover 100% staff time.
Okay, that's good to know. And then in terms of comment, I think there is consensus on the council that general plan amendment is not something that should be treated as normal. I think in the past, even before 2016, once every 10 years, it's not normal, it's abnormal. So that's not send a message to the public or the developer community that it's normal to request general plan amendment in Cupertino in the past or even now. The message should be follow the general plan as best as you can, and the GPA authorization process should be for projects that offer significant benefit to the community. Then we might consider through the GPA authorization process. And I think I support the idea that we do it once a year. I think this probably serve more what Rod's original intent to group the projects together so that we can consider them together. Then we might be able to group them. Then I think project applicants can plan early what they want to propose. This shouldn't be too much of hindrance on their process. Yeah, okay, so
Okay.
I think it's important, the messaging. That's also from the community. Our community keeps sending email to us. How come they don't follow the general plan? How come they don't follow the general plan? And then we hear from the staff. It's a normal process for people to request general plan amendment. So there is a mixed message here. So let's try to unify the message so we don't have misunderstanding. Then that might be better. Thank you.
Okay. It's 6:43 now. What kind of action do we need here? Just direction to staff to
Yeah.
look into,
We're done.
I think it,
We've taken notes and
okay, right. So you,
modifying the current process is what I heard.
right.
Yes, and Mr. Mayor, is there a consensus from the council to take these notes and go through the planning commission as the chair stated before, or if you want us to come back to the council?
Right. I would love it to go to the planning commission first instead of to us. I mean, if that
But I
reduces
think
our
that-
workload.
But didn't the community complain that it's just too many meetings for them to attend?
Well, no, if you cut it down to one, then it ends up being more streamlined, and you also have more time to consider. One of the things about planning commission is that they can take some of the initial work, matching up the rationale for asking for a particular item with the impact that a project would have if it.
And it is meetings to attend. And I mean, on the one side, I got the sense that the community wants to have
Yeah.
more input, and they get more input by coming
And then
to
there's
the
too many
meetings.
meetings.
Yeah, it's not easy. Yeah, I
I'm
agree,
okay
believe
with
me.
adding planning commission. Oh, one more thing. So current process will allow them to resubmit. If rejected, they can resubmit in 1 month. Do you think that still makes sense now that it's once a year process, or maybe we should extend?
But just have them resubmit in half a year, within half a year, so that.
Or 3 months? I don't know.
3 months or half a year, since it's a year long.
Yeah, maybe like 3 months, I think makes more sense.
Yeah, if it's a tiny change that is the reason it didn't get through the gateway. But in general, if it's a tiny change, we would let it through the gateway and say, hey, we don't like this part of it. You need to change it. It's got to be really, really terrible when with
Yeah,
no
true.
hope when it doesn't get through the gateway.
When it's tiny change, I think we can approve it with the condition we want this change.
And we've done that, yes, in the past.
We can do that, right, if it's a tiny change. So if we reject, it's not a tiny change that can fix it.
Yeah, exactly. And then they just need to come back in the next
Then
cycle.
maybe it's 3 months, or you think next cycle?
I'm fine with 3 months, yeah.
Okay.
So it's 6:46.
Right, I would still advocate for 6 months, because then you could actually, if we're somewhere between tiny and significant enough for a new GPA process, then you could actually run it through planning commission potentially again. And
Yeah.
also, half a year.
Good point. The same
I
number
like
of
that idea
meetings.
too.
Yeah.
Okay,
It makes
It's the same number of meetings, so I'm okay with it.
I'm fine with 6 months, let
I mean-
staff come back with that.
Part of this is a forcing function that gets you hopefully to have them be more flexible. If there are things we want and they go, God, I don't want to wait 6 months. We want them to be intentional and not just make this a leap in the park, right? We want them to put their best foot forward and give us a good project. And so I think 6 months is good.
Yeah, and I think,
Yeah.
an applicant will meet with us, individually and, get a sense of what we think.
That's a good point, because if we want to ask for some reduction of something, they have to think, okay, do they wait for 6 months or just agree right now? Then more likely they'll say, okay, we'll just agree with you. Right?
All right, listen.
Yeah, exactly.
We need to adjourn
Okay.
this meeting at 6:47.
So I
So-
wanted one last
Let's-
comment that I think is pretty
Okay,
important.
very briefly.
So I would also like to add, though, that when I see these GPAs, unfortunately, they really don't have the most important item in it, and that is an understanding of the impact on the traffic, an understanding on the impact on our schools, the understanding on the impact to the community. I think that anything that's going to come to a public meeting should have those. Those should not wait until an approval night to show that, well, the EIR that was done, here's the no. We can request that up front, and they should be able to come up with that to within 85 to 90% accuracy, so that the community knows what the impact is going to be. And I don't hear us talking about that, talking about 6 months, no. The information that the public really needs to know are the impacts on the community, and those should be up front. So
That's a good point. Perhaps when it comes back, staff can recommend additional materials that the project applicant should include in their application, the GPA application.
No, the gateway application.
The gateway application to address these issues.
Okay, yeah, that's a good point too. So yeah, Ben, write that down as well. And so I want to adjourn the special meeting at 6:49. We're 4 minutes over. We can start the next meeting. Let's take 5 and start it at 6:55.
Chow,
Here,
Councilmember Sinks, Councilmember Willie,
here,
Vice Mayor Paul,
Here.
Mayor Sharp.
Here. Do we have any postponements?
No postponements, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, then we are on to oral communications. Let me go back to the attendees here and see. We have 3 people that wish to speak for oral communications. This is for items that are not on the agenda. If it's an agenda item, please wait until that item comes up on the agenda. You get 3 minutes, and I will change my background if you're watching from green to yellow to red. When it's red, you really need to finish up. Well, you're out of time. So first person for oral, we have Peggy Griffin. Welcome, Peggy.
Hi. Not that one, Kirsten. That's for item 2. Hello? Okay. Mayor Scharf, Vice Mayor Paul, and council members and staff, I have a very short request. This is regarding Westport. I'd like to request that the city council direct the staff to obtain an analysis of whether the waiver to distribute BMR is necessary. It was not analyzed by the third party, and I think it should be, because I do not think it's necessary. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Peggy. That was nice and short. And next we have Lisa Warren. Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you. So just about 5:30, I sent you all an email that I know you haven't been able to look at, but please do. And what it pertains to is during the June 16th meeting, Councilmember Chow took the time to make some statements and show some language, and as I think she put it, explain, she's set the record straight. And at the time, there were no comments afterward from anyone on council, and I truly wish that I had been able to say something then, but I couldn't then, so I am now. So please go back and watch those snippets of that meeting where she talks about the Brown Act. She talks about the enormous value of asking questions. She herself illustrated that as a board member for CUSD, and it brought to light a lot of things that never would have been. And it's just her, in my opinion, it's her job. And I think she said somewhere in what she said, that it's your job to ask questions and not get irritated when people ask questions. There's a reason for it. So I just want to applaud her for doing that in the calm way that she did, and hope that you all kind of took it in and it soaked in, and not just you, but the community, and that you're all respectful when you ask questions. And it's important. We have 3 minutes and we don't really get to ask questions. We say things, we ask questions, but we don't get answered in public. So you're speaking for us as well, some of the time. So I just appreciate it and hope that you guys didn't just think it was a waste of time, and perhaps even thanked her after the meeting. That's it.
Okay, next we have Linda Stevens. Welcome, Linda. Linda, are you there? Okay, I've unmuted you, but I think you also need to unmute. We'll try unmuting you again. Okay, we will move on then to Larry Mathikas. Did I pronounce your name right? Oh wait, there's Linda. Linda, can you? Oh no, where did she go? No, I don't see her now. Okay, go ahead, Larry. Larry. Okay, there you are. Go ahead. We can hear you.
Thank you. My name's Larry Mathiakis. I've lived at 20612 Sunrise Drive for 28 years. I know that the council will be discussing short-term rentals later tonight, but this is a nighttime scenario that we're experiencing right now on Sunrise Drive that you need to be aware of. You'll be hearing from me and my neighbors complain about a short-term rental at 20570 Sunrise Drive, and we're asking the city tonight to immediately revoke the owner's business license and stop the owner from future short-term rental activity at this property. You'll hear that the owner of this short-term rental has already made numerous violations of the current ordinance that the city established for these types of businesses. The current ordinance says that the property owner must be the primary resident at the property and be on site during the leasing period. At this particular property, we've never seen the owner living at this address. The current ordinance says that the total number of transient guests must be limited to 2 or fewer, and that all transient rentals must be an incidental use of the residence. We've witnessed up to 20 or more people residing at this address for overnight stays, which is another...
Excuse me, but it seems like we're speaking on an agenda item.
No, this is not an agenda item. This is separate from the short-term.
I'm not speaking of the proposed ordinance. I'm speaking of the existing ordinance. Because it's based on the existing ordinance, I thought it would be appropriate to speak.
Yeah, it is appropriate. Sorry. Yeah, Rod, this is not related to the agenda item. So yeah, go ahead, Larry. Sorry.
As I said, 20 or more people. So it's clear that these transient rentals are not an incidental use as stated by the ordinance. They're in fact the only use of this residence.
Right.
But the most important reason I'm here today and my neighbors are the numerous incidents of criminal activity by the tenants, which is well documented by the Sheriff's Department. In short, the tenants at this address have been a threat to public safety and in particular to the residents of Sunrise Drive. It's not a single criminal incident, it's a pattern of criminal activity over several years, which the sheriff can confirm. The short-term tenants at this address have included criminals with known arrest warrants in possession of illegal firearms and stolen cars, drug dealers, and underage minors. And despite this criminal activity, this short-term rental continues to operate under a City of Cupertino business license. And the City of Cupertino continues to collect taxes and fees from this business. Why can't the city revoke the license of a business supporting criminal activity? since the city was the entity that issued the license in the first place. The numerous visits by the sheriff must be also costing the city money. Why can't the city transfer these policing costs to the property owner to discourage these types of violations? So in conclusion, please help us keep our beloved Sunrise Drive safe and restore our sense of safety and peace in the neighborhood. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Deb, did you have some information on this situation?
I do, but I can certainly, help hopefully provide them to Mr. Mafiakis. Is that how you pronounce your last name?
Yes.
And his neighbors, as soon as we can, as soon as I can, and Captain Urena is here to perhaps answer any questions they might have, but it doesn't necessarily sound like they have any questions.
Okay, I guess their question is, what would constitute the city shutting down a short-term rental?
Yes, well, I can certainly talk to them about the code enforcement summary that I sent to council. I can certainly tell them what's happening.
Okay, why don't we finish oral first, and then maybe you can talk about that. Is that allowable, Heather, since it's not an agenda item?
Staff can give brief responses to questions.
Okay, great. Okay. Well, I'll let the rest of the residents talk, and then the staff can respond. Okay, Marcia Elmer.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for your attention to this matter. I'm Marcia Elmer Mathiakis. I'm a 28-year resident of Sunrise Drive. I want to go through a brief chronology of what the has been through the last several years with this situation, which has now reached a crescendo and needs to be addressed immediately. The house was sold in June 2014. 2016, there was a drug bust. I have contacted the owner. She has not been responsive. In October 2016, there was a car stolen across the street, Airbnb house. There was an attempted break-in in December 2016. In July 2018, I worked with Philip Wilcom of the Cupertino Code Enforcement. That actually transpired through much of 2018. There were large parties there frequently, rowdy parties, cars on the street. Every weekend there was loud noises. We would call the sheriff, they would come. They said they couldn't do anything. August 2018, there was a bus unloading 20 people there with their suitcases who spent approximately a week going back and forth in the bus every day. Every weekend, every week, multiple different people there, staying there on the street, lots of garbage on the street. September 2018, a large event at the house, approximately 40 people, 17 cars parked on Sunrise Drive. November 2018, I filed a witness affidavit with code enforcement attesting to all these events. I believe that there was some code violations for the owner. In 2019, the house was for sale off and on for much of the year. And then beginning in May 2020, there was a car broken into on our street. June 3rd, 2020, there was arrests at 11 p.m., 4 sheriff cars with a K-9 unit, 2 stolen vehicles discovered on our street. June 17th, there was a party with approximately 50 underage minors, alcohol. Sheriffs came at 10 p.m., dispersed the underage minors. Around 11:30 that night, the criminals came. There were stolen cars, drugs, guns, felony arrests on June 17th of this year. June 22nd, I spoke again with Philip Wilcom. He said the city was going to look into it. Haven't heard anything back from anybody at the city. June 26th, there were other events chronicled on the chronology that you can look at. June 27th, there were more cars, 5 or 6 cars parked at the house. June 30th, there was another arrest, felony burglary person who was at the house. So all these events are totally unacceptable. We feel unsafe, and we feel the city needs to take some action now, as soon as possible, to address this situation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Alexa Tang. Welcome.
Hi, so I'm also one of the residents on Sunrise Drive. Just wanted to support the same statement made by Larry and Marsha earlier. So like me and my husband, we recently moved to Sunrise Drive to start our family, and my husband actually grew up in Cupertino and has always described the city as one of the safest cities in the South Bay. But however, I think since the first 2 months we were here, we were woken up late at night by teenagers parked outside of our house, speaking loudly for over an hour and disturbing the neighborhood before heading to a party. We also noticed suspicious individuals loitering on our street and discovered that our neighbors' cars were broken into. We've heard sirens due to several arrests that occurred and learned that there were guns, burglars, and drug dealers. I think all the above issues were brought forth by the short-term rental property at 20570 Sunrise Drive due to the owner's extreme lack of care to whom she should or should not rent to, which I think this really severely exposed our neighborhood to danger, which already was mentioned by Larry and Marsha. We do not wish to head down that path any further, and really we're here today to seek for your attention, immediate action to put an end to all these foreseeable risks. So, we really are here to ask you to revoke her ability to conduct short-term lease and help us restore our neighborhood safety. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Alice. Welcome, Alice.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can, yes, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, sorry for the delay. So my family has been living on Sunrise Drive for over 20 years. I have witnessed many of these arrests because the police sirens are on the streets. My children were terrified. They're back from college. The arrest on June 3rd was right in front of my house, literally on my doorstep. The canines were out there. The police were out there. I don't know if there were guns. It was 11 o'clock. We were just stepping on looking at the staircase and looking outside, hoping it would stop. But at 1:40 a.m. in the morning, after the sheriffs have made their arrest and left, somebody else came and dropped off a car and just parked it right in front of our door. And they left it there for 3 days. I called the sheriff. Sheriff Harper answered my call. He came and he said it has been a stolen car. And for some reason, the sheriff they can't tow it away. So luckily, they got in contact with the owner, and the owner then towed the car away. So on the 17th, we saw the arrest down the road, again, with 4 cars, and we immediately were alerting the whole street that this is happening, and everybody be careful. And this last incident with the burglary down, again, at the Airbnb, we saw the woman just loading up her house. I asked my neighbor, Greg, if he's seen that. He said earlier on, they saw her loading up the house. So we think that they're setting up something there with identity fraud, where they collected a lot of different credit cards, and they just used Cupertino as a base for them to haul up all this stuff and store it there. So we see a pattern where the criminals are establishing a home at our home, and we're really scared because there are loaded guns, as you know, in minors. If you call on Sean, he will tell you there are undressed minors locked in rooms at the Airbnb the night of the arrest. So you guys really have to take this seriously. Now, what I don't understand is that the cost, there's a cost to this, and we've been paying the price of property damage and bodily harm, as you would hear from our neighbors who suffer from attacks of asthma because of the frequent marijuana use at that house. And the taxpayers of Cupertino will be paying additional costs for the police arrest, increased patrols. So in addition to our safety, we're actually paying out of pocket for a lot of that indirectly. So I understand this may not have come to your attention earlier, but now it has. So I'm asking you to start the enforcement today, and pass the cost to the owner of the short-term rental property. She should be the one that's paying for her action. She should be the one that's not profiting from taking advantage of us, taking advantage of our safety. not the neighbors on Sunrise Drive and not the taxpayers of Cupertino. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, we are on to Ray Chong. Welcome, Ray.
Ray.
Hello, hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. I also live on Sunrise Drive. I'm a 29-year resident. I'll keep this short. You've heard all the incidents through the years. Many of them have been reported to the authorities, to the people who are responsible for these things, and yet this goes on. So my question is, who's accountable for this? Who in the city is accountable for upholding the rules that you make? It's just perplexing to me that this can go on for years, and it takes all of us to get onto a city council call to talk about it. Where does it go? Who's going to take action on this? Maybe if you guys can tell me who to go to, I'll go to that person.
Okay. When we're done here, the staff will speak on this. I had not been aware of this until I started receiving these emails. So let everyone talk, and then we will have the staff
I don't care if you weren't
respond.
aware of it. You should have been aware.
Okay, welcome, Greg.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I ran a business and lived on Sunrise Drive in Cupertino with my wife and daughters now for 27 years. The majority of those years have been great. However, in the past few years, we have seen severe change in our safety and the quality of our life in our neighborhood because of the Airbnb 20570 Sunrise Drive on our street. We have had an increase in crime and issues. People break into our homes, they steal our possessions, some cases while the residents are in the home. There have been multiple felony arrests for burglary, possession of a loaded gun with filed off serial numbers, garbage left in our yards, stolen cars parked on our streets in front of our houses, people urinating on our porches. I've had to ask people to move from in front of my house at all hours of the night. I get up at 3:30 in the morning. They're still out there partying because they are loudly partying and waiting for the party house to open. There have been drugs and minors present, all of which can be verified by the sheriff's report, which have been sent to the city. If it were not for the due diligence of our sheriff's department and their work, the problems and the crimes would have escalated even worse. We shouldn't have to live in fear in our own neighborhood. The owner of the Airbnb has broken laws and promises, and you, the city, have done nothing. The owner of the property has promised to make changes only to have another party the next week at her rental, which she is supposed to live at by law to rent as an Airbnb, but does not. I ask that you do your job as our elected officials and close it down. We ask that you do this for the safety of the citizens and the election that you serve. You can ask the sheriff, he's there. They've got all the reports, they've sent them to you. I know this is not something that's blind. We've talked to the council. Please take this issue seriously. Thank you.
Okay. All right, next we have the phone number. It's caller 8858.
Hello, this is Greg Popovich with Gold Bar Builders. We build ADUs, and I'm currently attempting to build one in Cupertino. This is the first one there. We build them for senior citizens, teachers, and people that are support staff, like people that work at City Hall. We built currently over 25 units in Silicon Valley, and Cupertino is kind of unique in that the requirements far exceed any other city we've worked in Silicon Valley. The requirements that we're encountering have added up to $10,000 in additional test engineering and the surveys that we were required to do. They're requiring us to do something that we do if we were building a 5,000 square foot custom home. The current one that we're trying to get passed is a 749 square foot ADU for a family member that can't afford to live anywhere else. And the father's trying to accommodate his daughter for their wedding. I'll give you an example of one of the overburdensome regulations that I'm encountering right now. We decommissioned a swimming pool in the backyard. With that, we brought in engineered fill, did 6-inch lifts, had a certified engineering geologist present watching the lifts, and doing compaction tests all the way up from 8 feet all the way up, scarified the earth where the ADU is going and had the compaction done there up to 94% compaction, which is almost like concrete. Cupertino wants another soils test on top of that at a cost of $3,500 to $4,500 are the estimates that I got today. Cupertino's claim is that they want that test because it provides additional information. Currently, the way that the code's written is that Cupertino is not responsible for anything on that test or in that report. And they also have the ability to waive that report. Since we already have a certified engineering geologist letter stating that it's 94% compaction, that has been more than adequate in every other city that we've worked in. I'm asking you to help and to take ADUs and make them a priority. The people that serve us in our cities are not being able to live in our cities, and as such, need to have some type of a housing situation that they can afford. But when I'm adding an additional $10,000 in engineering, soils testing, surveys on top of something that is already expensive to build in their backyard, it's not allowing for them to sit there and to try to accommodate the requirements of their family. One of the things we had to do is it was 792 square foot originally. There was a $15,000 park fee that was going to be required. We dropped the size of that unit to 749, and all of a sudden the $15,000 went away. We would have been able to possibly have paid a couple $1,000s on top of that, but the $15,000 was far excessive. So by dropping it to 749, we were able to eliminate that. But we're not able to eliminate all these other tests, requirements, engineering, surveys that you would need for a 5,000 square foot custom to accommodate a 749 square foot ADU. Please take into consideration how overburdensome and how difficult it is in Cupertino to get a plan set approved. In talking to a number of my different builder, I've called them competitors, but we're friendly competitors, there's a number of them that will not come to Cupertino to build. And possibly that's why you don't see a lot of ADUs like you do in the surrounding areas, Los Altos, in Sunnyvale, even San Jose. All of the other cities around you are building ADUs to accommodate the housing crisis. Please take into consideration what it's taking, talk to the powers that be, and have them take a look at possibly going a little deeper into common sense versus what something states. Once it states something that they can actually waive a report, it's a good idea to possibly take a look at a report that I've already given them from a certified engineering geologist, and to take that and say, you know what, that's more than good enough. We don't need to require an additional.
Please finish up. You're way over time.
And that's in conclusion. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Mayor, may I direct a question to the city
Sure,
manager?
of course, yes.
Yeah, I am concerned. We used to be a city that was friendly to these ADUs, and now it seems like we're not. I know Mr. Popovich from prior correspondence. I also know that folks that are interested in building these things have gone to the state again and again and said, we need new laws that take away local control. Before the folks that are pushing for this go back to the state and say, look, what Cupertino is making us do now, which I'm certainly not in favor of, I would appreciate our city manager reviewing policies of any cities that Mr. Popovich might name and giving us an assessment of whether we're being reasonable or unreasonable in allowing construction of these accessory dwelling units. Could I make that request of you? Deb?
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay,
And
all right.
Greg, I'd encourage you to be in touch with Deb to give her the information. We need to be competitive on this. Thank you.
Okay, next
I
is.
think I'd like to just add on to that, to try and make it as efficient and productive as possible. Greg has made a list of items, and I would think that we pass that list on to our building department and ask them to go down each one of those and provide their commentary on it, you know, so that we really do address the issues that were brought up.
All right, thank you, John. Now we are on to Sean Krepp. Welcome. Oh, I'm sorry, you're using an old version of Zoom. I have no way to let you talk. So we'll move on just to let people know, when I allow people to talk, if you're using an old version of Zoom, I get a message saying allow to talk is not available because XYZ is using an older version. So you have to use the latest version. Welcome, Mooney.
Or send an email and call.
Right, or send an email or call in.
Yeah.
Mooney, welcome.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for letting me speak again. So I read through, everything that residents in Sunrise Drive submitted. Wow, I certainly don't want to live on that street. I love Cupertino. I moved here, precisely for what it is, like a safe place and good schools and all that. After reading through, everything on Sunrise Drive, I was like, wow, what if this happens on my street? I certainly don't want to be in front of you with, my fellow residents complaining about the same thing. So please do something to fix it. Even though I don't live on Sunrise Drive, I'll lend my support to my fellow residents. Please fix it. Otherwise, we might as well consider changing the name from Sunrise Drive to Nightmare Drive. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mooney. Next we have caller 0691.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. I'm Diana Argabright, the director of the UFRAP Museum of Art at De Anza College, and also a longtime Cupertino resident. I wanted to thank all of you and the Parks and Recreation Commission for your kind approval of our community funding grant proposal for 2021 at the June 16th meeting. I wasn't well that week and wasn't able to be present for public comments. So I'm going to use my 3 minutes really quickly. I wanted to give a quick overview of 2019-20 with a look ahead. The community funding grant helps support the one-of-a-kind exhibitions and related public programming. In the fall, Space and Place explored multicultural interpretations of outer space, hidden layers of culture and history in public spaces, and issues around space and equity. A major installation in that show, Brush the Sky by Midori Kono-Teal and Tomiko Teal, referenced their family history as Japanese-American farmers in Cupertino in the early 1900s. The winter exhibit, Women Pathmakers, honored women whose courage and creativity helped change the world. Cupertino Fine Arts Commissioner Sonia Dami was a collaborator. And this show ended just before the shelter-in-place order began in mid-March. And for spring, we entered the virtual world with the online De Anza Student Art Show, including the Art at Home Gallery with a selection of student and faculty images that respond to and reflect on the current pandemic. I'll be sharing some of these with the Cupertino Historical Society's Tell Us Your Story project, documenting Cupertino pandemic experiences. Almost done here. The fall 2020 in-person exhibition has been postponed since De Anza College will be closed except for very limited hybrid class labs. Plans are in place for winter and spring exhibitions, and I'm hoping for the best. And in conclusion, with public safety a top concern, we will use creativity and flexibility in responding to the pandemic and the services that we can safely provide. From online classes and shows to outdoor pop-up exhibitions, projections, billboards, even utility boxes and chalk art on sidewalks, art is and can remain and will remain an integral part of Cupertino. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. And for oral is, let's see, where did that person go? Kitty Moore. Welcome, Kitty.
All right. Good evening, Mayor. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I am concerned about the 20570 Sunrise Drive complaints, and I know that you are going to look into those and make some decisions about that. I am concerned with the project regarding the soils compaction tests, and that particular project, you're talking about filling in a swimming pool, and you do need to have some soils tests after the pool area has been filled so that the final slab, if they're going to be using slab on grade, that it is not going to crack due to settlement. So I am concerned that staff has made legitimate requests and that we're hearing complaints about those legitimate requests, sorry. So, please look into that and see that we're not going to be dissuaded from reasonable decisions. Thank you.
Okay. Oh, and I do see I have one more person, Larry Dean. Welcome, Larry.
There we go. Hello, Mayor. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Good evening. Dear Mayor Sharp and fellow council, on behalf of Walk by Cupertino, we thank you for continuing to fund the active bike ped projects in Cupertino. We are so glad to see the McClellan Road Phase 2 project starting up next month. We also thank you for your patience and extended efforts to address the Rignart Creek Trail residents' concern in a constructive and empathetic manner. Security and privacy are always at the top of anyone's list. You certainly are taking reasonable extra steps to mitigate concerns, and we thank you for it. Many of us recall the angst and contention 10 years ago regarding the Scenic Circle Bridge. Now the residents love it, and it's enjoyed by the immediate neighborhood and is viewed as a broader neighborhood amenity. No privacy or security issues there. Now pending is the work on the Linda Vista Trail. We feel the Scenic Circle experience has made the Linda Vista Trail implementation much easier. City staff has worked closely with the residents to listen and mitigate their safety and security concerns. Now the community is looking forward to its implementation. Another pending success story in making it easier and safer to walk and bike in Cupertino. Thank you so much for your efforts.
Okay, is that all? Oh, I'm sorry. I've got one more. Larry, were you done?
Oh, I am.
Okay, thank you. Next
Thank
I
you.
have Taghi. Welcome, Taghi. Allowing to talk. Okay, welcome. Are you there, Taghi?
Okay, now I should be able to talk. Can you hear me now?
Yes, go. You have 3 minutes.
Good evening. Thank you for your service and long hours at the council for years. Well, I'm a Cupertino resident for a long time, and recently I've noticed a lot of people who are walking and biking. About a few weeks ago, I was driving my daughter to airport. I noticed at least 15, 20 people walking. And during the day, I see a lot of bikers, actually, families, small kids. And I'd like to thank your support for the projects in the past and funding them. And I'd like to ask you to continue good work in funding future projects to make it safer for residents to walk and bike. The bike shops are so busy that they have a hard time to keep up. I was at my dentist, and one of the people there told me her husband never biked, started biking recently because he's working at home. So the trend is changing, and we need to make the city much, much safer and easier for people to walk and bike when the school opens. Hopefully kids bike to school, walk to school.
And I've been walking every day and pretty much biking five days a week to do my shopping. I had a dental appointment, I bike to the dentist rather than driving. And we've noticed the air pollutions are much lower recently because there's less driving. So it's good for the environment too. I want to thank you and encourage you to continue building trails and safe routes for people to use. Have a nice evening.
Okay, thank you. Madam City Clerk, did we have any emails for oral?
We have one, just letting us know that there is a caller, Sean Krepp, that is waiting to speak. Phone number ending in 5348. I don't. So it's the top caller. They don't have their.
Oh, okay. They don't have their hand raised. Okay, that's fine. Well, welcome, Sean.
Hello, thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the Cupertino City Council. This is also in regards to 20570 Sunrise Drive, the short-term rental, which actually is adjacent to my home. I've lived here 2 years. I had heard rumblings about all of the past, but thought it couldn't be as bad as it really is until the night of June 17th, when I was having a barbecue in my backyard and the 5-person arrest happened. And that very night, one of my guests who was joining us in that backyard, his car, someone tried to break into his car. And later when I went out to find out what was going on, I learned of the 5 arrests, 1 for a gun felony, 2 for drugs. There were 2 stolen cars on the scene, and underage girls as young as 14 years old from this community found unclothed and locked in the bedroom. Now I have 2 kids, 1 young daughter and a son, who came out that evening and heard all about this, and I had to have really difficult conversations with them. So for all of you who have kids and families, you understand how difficult this can be. So I got involved the next day, and I thought, oh, well, this homeowner must have a shred of accountability for this. So let's have a meeting with her and find out what she's going to do to change the situation. So about 20 of us from the street, together with the police officers, Post and O'Sullivan and 1 more, met with Cindy, the house owner, and we wound up negotiating for her to make 3 changes. 1, to change the STR to a long-term, as that would make this problem go away. 2, to install a camera so she could see who is coming and going and regulate and stop these parties. 3, while she looks for a long-term renter, to be more stringent on who she screens for coming and going, because there's a clear pattern of criminality. On that day, Sergeant Post, and I want to commend the officers of Santa Clara Sheriff Department. They have been outstanding. They've, in their own words, patrolled the crap out of this, but they can't go into the house, and they're doing the best they can. So on that day, we stood and negotiated with her, and basically 1 week later, there was a known felon in the place. So I had the Santa Clara Sheriff's Department in my backyard for the 3rd time in 2 weeks. And I asked myself the question, what if the person who was on that guest contract, who jumped the fence allegedly that night, had jumped into my backyard? Would we have had an Orinda-style shooting on our hands? Are we going to let it get to that level? Is this ticking time bomb going to be unwired? What is the city going to do to make this go away? Because clearly someone is running a business that is unethical and needs to be closed down. Now, on those 3 items that we negotiated, I followed up several days ago, and here's what Cindy had to say. Oh, I got a long-term renter.
Well, we spoke to that person. She got a De Anza student to cover their car and park it in front of the place. So clearly not a long-term renter. On item 2, I bought us an extra security camera because I've just installed $600 worth of security equipment. And I offered it to her with my employee discount. No response. On item 3, the arrested felon happened on the 28th, and multiple parties and people coming and going from all hours mean that she has no intent of changing anything. You have the power to make this change happen. She clearly will not. So please act. I'm asking you. And by the way, on the later conversation on point 8, I think you need to link some kind of compliance with your regulation. As it reads right now, it's super toothless on implementing the rules. So I think any STR owner who has a criminal case with their premise should be suspended until they come forward with a burden of proof and that they can comply with the regulation. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. So now, city staff, can you respond to all these things about at Sunrise?
Yes.
Deb and the sheriff?
Yes. And then I'll let Rich respond. So I want to lead with saying that we are actively pursuing all enforcement measures possible in coordination with the city attorney's office and the sheriff's office. As I think I told council, we could even have something culminating this week. So what I'd like to do is offer some of my time to the 20 neighbors, or at least all of the neighbors here, for a socially distanced, appropriate meeting in the neighborhood where I can come and talk to you in a little more specifics. I'm happy to do that even tomorrow as time allows or as people are available. So I offer that. The STR ordinance that's coming up, I think what's happening is that the main symptom is that our current ordinance is kind of toothless. So it worries me that somebody just said, the gentleman that was just talked about our new STR ordinance, which does add additional regulations and enforcement measures, but we can talk about that one as it comes up on the agenda and see if we need to do more with it.
Okay, Sheriff.
Good
Captain.
evening, Mayor and members of the council. Thank you for having me here today. So I think the residents pretty much covered everything. We have been extremely busy on Sunrise Drive. I've made a commitment to the neighborhood to make sure that we are proactive in the neighborhood and that we help keep those residents safe. And so we have been working with the building department, as Deb mentioned there. We'll continue to do that. But I do want to let the residents know to please continue to call us. Call 911, call our non-emergency number, 408-299-2311. We want to know when there's problems in the neighborhood. We want to get there quickly. We want to address them. So I look forward to continuing to work with the city to make sure that we do something about this particular area.
Okay, thank you. Oh, by the way, do we know, is this an actual Airbnb or is it just a short-term rental that is not being done by Airbnb?
I think certainly Rich can answer more questions than I can, but I've become aware that it's not just an Airbnb client. There are multiple carriers involved here, which is why I think there may be some ability to circumvent the vetting rules. So
right, that's what worries me because I know Airbnb has specific rules that could not possibly be being followed.
Yeah, and Airbnb right now is in full cooperation at this point. So, and I'd like to keep it that way until we figure out exactly which actions we're going to be taking.
Okay, very good.
Can I ask one quick question of staff, and that is, you know, as the mayor said earlier, this is the first that we have heard of it. Can you keep us abreast of, you know, whatever transpires from now going on? We have the list tonight of up to the current point in time.
Right.
But if this is a continuing situation. I'd like to be kept abreast of it, rather than not knowing until it comes back to the city council again.
Understood. My goal would be that I won't have to keep you up to date, if you know what I mean.
Okay.
Let's hope so, but
Yep.
if it is happening and continue,
Yep.
please keep us in the loop there.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have a question for the sheriff. So can you give an estimate about maybe the number of hours your department have to spend on this neighborhood?
I can't estimate the number of hours. I can tell you that we've had at least 7 party calls there in the last couple of years. So I can't give you an exact number or an estimation because I really don't know. I can tell you that every time that we respond with at least 2 deputies, typically 4, but at least 2, and we're there about an hour. And so we've had, I don't know, probably about 12 to 15 calls. So it's a significant amount of hours.
Thank you.
Okay.
I just had one question too. Captain Urena, will you be with us later when we discuss the proposed ordinance change?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I have some questions, but I think they're probably more appropriate dealt with there. And they go to, basically, okay, so what more teeth do we need? And, what do you suggest? So I'd love to hear from you when we get to that item. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everyone. We are done with oral. We are on to city manager update on COVID-19 response efforts. Welcome, Deb.
Good evening. We had a few changes to the current shelter-in-place order from the county, allowing the opening of hair and nail salons as well as gyms. The county has received its variance from the state. You may have heard that we were kind of out of compliance with what the state wanted. So the outdoor dining that we established countywide actually can continue. So the variance has been submitted and accepted by the state. And I think I forwarded a press release to council just to make sure you were fully aware of that. In Cupertino, certainly with the requirements of social distancing and face coverings, unfortunately, we're now at 45 cases of COVID in Cupertino. There was an increase of 4 cases over the weekend. All of the results of our testing for the 3 days should have already been in the count. So this is definitely community spread. However, we are the lowest per 100,000 people in Santa Clara County. And if you do go to the website, the dashboard, it shows that we're in light blue as opposed to all the dark blue throughout the rest of the county. But we need to remain even more vigilant as we open up more businesses. So I just want to emphasize that for everybody. This Thursday, July 9th, there will be mobile testing sites set up for frontline essential workers only at the senior center. The county is planning on administering up to 150 tests. Grocery store workers, city employees, police, everybody on the front line are going to be prioritized to be tested this Thursday. Regular testing for everybody is likely to come back to the city in early August. And we are working with the Red Cross for a blood donation site at the senior center, which could include antibody testing. However, just want to put a caveat on that. If it does include it, the antibody testing will not be FDA approved. So there's that. City staff, we are, because of the new order, looking at what it's going to take to reopen the sports center in line with the order. However, we are also considering the seismic retrofit project that's slated on the facility as well, and just seeing what the timing might be. We are approximately at half occupancy for our first summer camp. I think people are still worried about their kids participating in group activities. And as a reminder, we have another 1-month-long summer camp coming up. And we are looking at options for extending the senior meals that the Chamber of Commerce has been providing through their fundraising and charity work. And those run out July 8th, tomorrow. So the city is looking at the possibility of how we might do that as well, to extend it for the seniors that require it. As far as the homeless encampments Tier 280 go, they continue to be offered services, including testing by the county, and the trash and debris services, as well as the porta potties and hand washing stations remain. And then just a follow-up to my Black Lives Matter solidarity, the action items that I received from council several weeks ago. I'm still marching through some. However, some of you may have noticed that we have uploaded a matrix, summary matrix, that is a product of my review of the sheriff's policies thus far. And that's the end of my COVID update, and I'm open for questions.
Okay, does council have any questions of Deb regarding COVID? Just speak up.
Hello?
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, did you mention the swimming pool status?
Yeah, you know, so I thought I updated council. We, let me summarize. The Blackberry Farm swimming pool would take too much money to provide for social distancing requirements if we were to open it. In other words, it is not outfitted with lane dividers or lane splitters or anything. So we just decided it wasn't worth the cost for the number of weeks we could keep it open. Therefore, we turned our attention to talking to the school district, Fremont Union High School District, to talk about the possibility of using the Monte Vista High School pool for the interim. And as we got closer and closer, it just ended up being too expensive for the amount of weeks we could keep it open, also giving consideration to the number of lifeguards we would have to kind of recertify and get ready for that. Just too expensive. So I believe I updated council with last week that we let that one go as well. Essentially, we would only be able to open the pool for a month's worth of use, which didn't really match with about $30,000 worth of cost. So we did pursue that, and it's probably, it was not financially, I won't say financially feasible, it wasn't cost effective.
All right, thank you, Deb.
Mm-hmm.
So we're on to item 2, the presentation on Civic Center parking analysis and recommendations. So can we have the staff report? Thank you. Roger, you there? Are you muted?
I am. I apologize. All right. Good evening, Mayor Scharf, council members, and members of the community. Roger Lee, Director of Public Works. I'm giving this presentation in a location that may drop my connection. If it does occur, Chad Mosley, Assistant Director of Public Works, is going to have to step in. For this presentation, Public Works will be going over a variety of recommended measures to improve parking at our Civic Center. It is our hope that council and the public will provide input. All of the programmatic measures that I will be discussing are for a 2-year time period due to the unknowns of what may occur at City Hall and COVID-19. The analysis of the parking issue being discussed tonight was written substantially before COVID-19 and the shelter-in-place order, and these conditions have certainly changed the immediate need for parking and will most certainly continue to alter how employees return to work and use the Civic Center facilities. So with that in mind, please know that the measures being recommended are intended to be flexible and will change. That being said, prior to the current conditions, visitors to the Civic Center frequently experience delays in finding a parking space. In this presentation, I will quantify these parking challenges, and then I will cover a series of recommendations to increase parking supply. Melanie Salvador, Public Works Project Manager, is on hand for technical questions, as is parking consultant Ben Huey from Kimley Horn Engineering. For any operational questions, I believe that both Community Librarian Claire Bricio and County Librarian Jennifer Weeks are also in attendance, and Assistant City Manager Diane Thompson is also available. Before starting the presentation, I do want to note that Council did receive 2 letters from the Library Commission in December of last year and this past January that did include parking suggestions. Public Works and our consultant did review these letters, and while the Library Commission does not
have purview over parking, that they certainly have a valid interest, and the measures that are being recommended and highlighted this evening were evaluated among other inputs, and many of their suggestions are included in this evening's recommendations. So with this introduction, I will get into the next slide that covers input received from the recommended measures. So Ted, if you would advance to the next slide, I'd appreciate it. All right, thank you, Ted. All right, so prior to starting the parking analysis, several surveys were conducted with library patrons and Civic Center employees. These surveys inquired on many topics, including how did you get here? Did you have a problem finding parking? How long do you plan to stay? For employees, questions were asked to gauge the willingness to utilize alternate modes of travel that included everything from carpooling, ride sharing, guaranteed ride homes to using your car via shuttle. And the information learned from these surveys were utilized to provide the recommendations that are being covered tonight. If council or the public would like more details regarding these surveys, attachment D of the staff report provides that detail. And so in this next slide, I will detail the existing parking that is available. So next slide, Ted. So there are 322 total parking stalls that serve the Civic Center. On page 2 of the staff report, there is a table of how these spaces are designated, and 308 were identified. 14 additional are also available and are dedicated to ADA spaces, 4-minute spaces, and maintenance vehicles. Now, frequently the demand for these 322 stalls are exceeded, and our consultant found the deficiency prior to COVID-19 estimated at up to 25 stalls. To address this issue, Council authorized in June 2019 up to $1 million to analyze and implement improvements and/or measures to increase parking supply. This action resulted in Public Works retaining Packport Consulting, Kimley Horn, to assess the parking demands, recommend solutions to increase parking supply, and to evaluate and recommend other ways and methods to discourage the parking of vehicles at the Civic Center. Next slide, Ted. As mentioned prior, future parking demands are dependent on a variety of factors that include if City Hall will be relocated, renovated, or replaced, how employees report to work post-shelter in place, how library returns to full service, and how the upcoming library expansion project increases the need for additional parking. While what may happen to City Hall and how employees return to work are yet to be determined, the library expansion project that is scheduled for completion at the end of next year and the use of the new space is expected to increase the demand for parking by up to 200 stalls. As the current deficiency is 25 stalls, the goal of the recommendations of this report is to offset the current deficiency plus the increased demand created by the library improvements. In the next few slides, I will detail 3 types of recommended parking improvements. But please keep in mind that the number of parking stalls created by these actions are estimates based on professional judgment of our consultants, and each measure will be reviewed over time for effectiveness. This review is recommended as many measures are voluntary and many unknowns continue to exist with the shelter-in-place order. So to these points, it is expected that improvements and measures that are being recommended will be phased in incrementally over time as conditions become more predictable. Next slide, Ted. So this slide details 2 recommended actions to increase the supply of parking. One is to convert an existing car parking stall on Rodriguez to a motor scooter parking, and the other is to add a second pickup drop-off location for library drop-offs on Torrey Avenue. And I want to emphasize it is a second pickup. We are not proposing to replace the current pickup that would remain. This additional drop-off location will change the current 4-minute stalls near the existing book drop-off and may provide an opportunity for loading, unloading, as previously suggested by the Library Commission. This list of physical improvements has been made intentionally short due to the unknowns that I previously discussed. The next slide includes recommendations for parking demand decrease measures and are programmatic in nature. So next slide, Ted. Very good. I'll make sure I'm on the right slide with you. The recommendations on this slide are referred to in the industry as Transportation Demand Management, or TDM. They do not involve physical changes, and unlike the 2 improvements in the previous slide that had one-time initial costs, these measures require monitoring and incur annual cost. The measures in this slide and the next 2 slides are organized based on cost per parking stall, which are listed from lowest to highest. The next slide continues the recommended parking demand decrease measures. So next slide, Ted. A significant recommendation of this slide is the changing of the 4-hour parking limits to 2 hours. For this recommendation measure to be effective, dollars have been included to provide increased code enforcement. And similar to the suggestion made by the Library Commission late last year, this increased enforcement will insist on monitoring of book drop-offs and potential loading and unloading areas. The next slide shows the equivalent number of parking stalls created if all recommended parking demand decrease measures are implemented. Would Ted go to that slide? Okay, very good. As shown on this slide, if all parking demand decrease measures are implemented, up to 188 stalls are created at a cost of just over $200,000 annually. Now, as mentioned before, and as will be shown in a couple of slides, these annual costs will be projected over a 2-year period, pending what may occur with our City Hall. And if a decision for City Hall is made in less than that time period, then costs could be lower. And conversely, if a decision goes beyond 2 years, then costs could be higher. The next slide outlines the one parking management measure recommendation that we are making. So next slide there. Sorry. Okay, the parking management measures have the goal of managing parking needs during peak demand times, and especially during large events. And as shown here, there is an opportunity to provide valet parking for up to 24 events per year. And this next slide provides a summary of the equivalent parking spaces created and the total 2-year cost to implement all recommended actions were they to be implemented. So go to the next slide, Ted. So if we did all the measures, both the physical and programmatic improvements that I've noted, then we would have and are implemented over that 2-year period, it is estimated that up to 235 equivalent parking stalls will be created, and that the 2-year cost is approximately $519,000. But as I mentioned before, implementation of these measures will be flexible and change depending on the impacts of COVID-19. So next slide, Ted.
I just wanted to add right there, pardon me for interrupting, Roger, that just as a reminder, some of the plans we come up with from here on out are going to be somewhat iterative like this, such that we can maintain flexibility until we have some certainty around COVID. So I just want to help prepare council and others that we're not trying to be wishy-washy. We're trying to provide enough flexibility to adapt and change as we find out more about how things are going to go.
No, thank you for that. And no, it's timely. So this is the last slide in our recommendation, and we're looking for input. It's greatly appreciated, and both staff and the consultants are available to answer any questions that you might have. So thank you very much.
Okay, very good. Let me see. Why don't we let the public speak first before we bring this back to council? I've got 3 people that wish to speak, 4 people. First, we have Peggy Griffin. Welcome, Peggy.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Mayor Scharf, Vice Mayor Paul, council members and staff, I support the staff's recommendation to preserve the library field as open space, not eating away or taking any portion of it for parking. As you here displayed is one of the suggestions from the Library Commission several months ago. And they proposed changing the parking to slanted. And I was looking at it, and it makes a lot of sense because it's easier to get in and out of. The top circle or oval, the dark green, in the staff report, it suggested adding another pickup area on Torrey. But if you move the whole thing to Torrey, then you reduce the congestion in that corner. The other thing is down here, the lower light green oval, below you have a second green oval where I tried to blow it up. if you made that entrance one way, and I don't know if this is allowed for fire safety or whatever, but if you made this whole entrance one way, I think you might have enough room for additional slanted parking spaces on the library side. I'm not sure what the measurements are needed. Anyway, those are the two things that I think might give more room. Let's see. And the staff report lists many suggestions to decrease the need. Several comments. I believe the strategy to add 2 secure bike spaces is not enough. We need more if you're trying to encourage people to ride their bikes. Even I, now that I'm back on my bike again, I would not go and park at the library just for fear of my bike being stolen. I've heard too many stories. And also, suggestion I have is to host a Cupertino bike party. The bike parties look fun. I mean, once we get past this COVID-19, from each of the schools to the library, maybe do a raffle and give away some secure bike locks at the bike thing in the fall. Also, do a bike lock rodeo where you go mark it set go and see how fast the kid can secure a bicycle in properly, and give them a bike lock if they win. Whatever the changes are, please take into consideration the plan for the opening where the Ragnart Creek Trail is going to be. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Peggy. I just wanted to ask Roger and Chad, whatever happened to the trial we were going to have with secure bike parking from that company in San Francisco?
Yeah, Mayor, I don't know why my video, I'm not allowed to open it. Maybe IT can help with that. But no, we are proceeding with that. I think it was called Bike Keep, and we're looking at, Chad can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe it's isn't it like 15 bikes if I recall? But I'm not sure. We are proceeding with that, and that's what this will be, Mayor.
Okay.
Yeah, we're looking at Chad Mosley, city engineer, we're looking at having 2 of them installed. They each have 5 bike racks on it. We were getting ready to purchase those, try and get all of the necessary electrical connections for it. But then the shelter happened, and they had an office in San Francisco, but my understanding it was one person's in San Francisco. That person's left the company, and so now our rep is on the East Coast, and I've been trying to set up a site meeting with them, but it's been problematic due to the shelter in place.
Okay.
We can move forward, but
All right.
it's a little slowed down.
Next is Jean Bedord. Welcome, Jean.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good evening, Mayor Scharf and council members. My name is Jean Bedord, and I am a Cupertino resident. I want to thank you for doing a parking study that looks at the Civic Center as a whole. However, as a former library commissioner, I find the data on library usage to be inadequate. The one and only one data point for library usage was October 15th, 2019. This was Tuesday, a weekday while school is in session. Now, library usage varies greatly depending on the day of the week as well as school holidays. The highest library usage occurs on weekends. Gate count on weekends runs 3,000 to 3,200 patrons each day. In contrast, gate counts during the week are 2,200 to 2,400 patrons, about 75% of weekend usage. Now, pre-COVID, this is where Cupertino hangs out. I don't know of any other area that's that busy. This study did not include day of the week analysis. This information is readily available from the library. However, it does not appear to have been considered in this study. And there was no day of week or time of day for community hall usage. And that data should be available from the city.
I would urge staff to dig deeper into the patterns of usage by library patrons and community hall events in addition to employee usage. I think you'd find most of the complaints are about library parking. I also urge you to prioritize bicycle lockers. Many of my friends would love to ride their e-bikes to the library, but they're afraid they'll get stolen. So that is a detriment, to using alternate forms of transportation. Thank you.
So does the staff want to comment on the day of the week studies? Roger?
This is Ben from Kimley Horn.
Okay.
If I can speak on the city's behalf, I work for Kimley Horn Associates. We were the firm that conducted the parking study. Just shed some light on what data we collected. We did collect on one day, which was Tuesday, October 15th, 2019. It was when typical schools were in session, and it was a typical weekday, not adjacent to any holidays. The reason why we had chosen a weekday as opposed to a weekend was because we were looking at the entire civic center as a whole, and so we wanted to include the city hall uses. And so if we had taken a survey on a weekend day, then we wouldn't have included any city hall employees parking in those spaces. And so, based on available budget that we had, the one day that we collected was that one weekday.
Okay. I mean, I'm just amazed you wouldn't collect on multiple days as part of the survey.
I do think, Mayor, that with now that COVID does exist and how the usage will be in the future, that having additional surveys to verify how things will be, I see that in the future as well.
All right, thank you.
So the reason we have only surveyed only one day was the budget, right? We only gave them budget for 1 day survey. Is that the reason?
No, I wouldn't jump to that conclusion. I mean, it's just using the judgment of having both facilities, all the facilities open at the same time. But that was the reason. It wasn't a limitation of budget. It's just what we thought would be the most representative.
Okay, because in the school district, I think they use volunteers to do like a bike audit. We could have done a car audit with volunteers. Maybe that's something to consider.
Yeah, okay. That's right.
All right, thank you. Next is...
Sorry, one last point I want to make. I think the speaker made note of, any meetings that occurred during that day. And so yes, on that specific Tuesday, we had specifically chosen that date because there was a library parents corner meeting at 10:15 a.m. There's also a library story room, a knitting at the library using the library story room at 4:00 p.m., as well as city council meeting that made use of the Cupertino Community Hall at 6:45 p.m. And there was also a family story time at the library parents corner at 7 p.m. And so we kind of did try to pick a worst case scenario where there was use of the library, the community hall, and the city hall all at one time, just to make sure that we covered kind of a worst case scenario.
All right.
It's good to know. So it's a whole day, not just a time of that day.
Correct. We did it from 10 a.m. to essentially 11 p.m.
Okay, great. Okay, Chin Pan, welcome.
Hello.
Hi.
Yeah, Mayor Steve Sheriff and the City Council, thank you for let me speak tonight, and I want to thank you, Roger, for these parking reports. And I'm a current library commissioner, but I speak and represent myself for this. And thank you for the reports. The reports, the library usage actually the peaks in after school and the weekends by the patrons. I'm a little bit disappointed, that we've been talking about using the Eaton School parking lot, and actually I physically walk from the Eaton parking lot to the library parking lot myself and timed it and reported the result at the library commissioner meeting. And in this report, it did mention about use local schools, but I think have some cost associated with it, but I don't see any more analysis was done for possible use of the Eaton School.
parking lot, particularly for after school and the weekend usage, which will be the peak usage for patrons. And so I'm hoping, that more analysis can be done. I did talk to Diane this afternoon, and I don't have a chance to read the whole reports. And we did talk about it, like use the Eaton school parking lot for day use. That's mainly for employee, but my, purpose is more for patrons to use for after school hours and the weekend. So I'm hoping to look into it. And honestly with you, I'm a little bit surprised that changing the 4 hours to 2 hours, we're adding 75K ongoing cost just to changing that. That's a little bit of surprise to me. So, thank you for the reports, and I'm hoping we can look into the possible use of the Eaton School parking lot.
Okay, thank you, Chin. I would point out, so I have been involved with Tournament of Bands for many years at Cupertino High School, and we use the Sedgwick parking lot for parking. However, it's not free to do that. We have to provide insurance to Cupertino Union High School District in order to officially use that lot. Nobody stops anyone from parking there if we don't do it, but we do get that insurance to make it all official. So it's not just, no one should think it's free for us to designate the Eaton parking lot as library parking, although people can park on the street or in that parking lot, no matter what. Next we have.
The staff addressed the cost. Her question about changing from 4-hour parking to 2-hour parking.
Well, they already addressed it. That's the enforcement cost.
So $750 is the enforcement cost?
Right. They have to have
not
people.
The cost for changing the label.
That is enforcement cost.
$750,000?
Yeah, we're just estimating a half-time code enforcement person would be required to properly enforce.
Right, not 750,000, 75,000.
75,000.
Right. Okay. Next person with their hand raised is Fire. Welcome, Fire. I guess that's Jennifer. Okay, you're unmuted. Go ahead.
Hi, this is Jennifer. Yeah, hey, Fire. Anyway, yes, this was an interesting discussion about the parking in the community center parking lot. Obviously, we all go to the meetings, city council, planning, etc., and people attend the library. So there is a constant demand for parking there. I'm just going to make a comment. I thought that was interesting when you all were talking about moving some of the library book drop-off over to Torrey. I think that's a good idea. I think that corner where the library book drop-off is, right at the edge of the library as you're coming in to enter into the city council chambers, is extremely congested. I come up there many times and there is more action there. You have people coming in, even unloading children run over, drop the books off, come back to the car. You have vehicles, being recharged. You have people walking in to the breezeway. And is there any way to move the bulk of that library book return to another location? Have you all considered even having the bulk of it be off-site and then the materials are returned via courier or employee or some way back to the library? I would imagine that it probably takes a great deal of time of the librarians to have to process returned materials. I was looking at having gone to obviously other libraries. Santa Clara Library has a system where it seems like you can drop something off and then the book moves for quite a distance away back to the library. I think that if you guys are trying to free up even 2 to 3 to 4 parking spaces, that area of high congestion and confusion where the drop-off is for the books could probably be tidied up a bit and made more efficient. By what were you planning to do at Torrey? Were you going to have a area you could drive in like at the post office to drop letters off with a car? I just think that we could do a lot more at that corner by even if you spent $5,000 to $10,000 to have a mechanized system to move the books underground. You might be saving a lot of money because you may be freeing up 3 to 4 spaces. Thank you.
Unmute. Thank you, Jennifer. Next is Lisa Warren. Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you.
Lisa, speak. Looks like Lisa disappeared here.
No. Hello?
Okay, are you going to speak?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, we hear you. Or we did. I'll unmute you again. Lisa.
Yes. This is
Speak.
the third. Okay. I don't know what's happening. I've been started 3 times. Okay, so I'm happy to see that staff left the library field, and that basically shows me that they see the value in the library field, as I think we all should. And I would like to say again that I hope that the library field actually designated a city park sometime soon. I'm also intrigued by Peggy's idea of the one-way entry on the library field side, enabling more parking. And I'm wondering if staff, Mayor, I think you have your mic on and you're doing something. If we could have staff comment on if that was considered, or if there's a problem with that, or if it would be even a better thing to do if and when the library field does become a park. I'm really intrigued by that. I think it would also, if that became a bike riding entry, you'd have more bikers feeling safe because there's not traffic going in 2 directions. Anyway, I don't know. Something to think about. That's it.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. Okay, there are no more hands raised here, so we'll bring it back to council for discussion. I don't have any questions, but Leon, do you want to go?
Oh, yeah. So first, I'd like to clarify actually 2 things. First, the library commissioners have had a lot of comments on the library parking and also mainly access to library. And then I was told, I spoke to a few of them yesterday and today, and found out that this item was taken off their work program because it seems to be the understanding from the staff when I talked to them that this is not under the Library Commission's current responsibility to look at access to library. But I feel right now the current code, they are responsible for facilities inside the library, anything inside the building. But it didn't specifically say they should also look at the access issue to the library, especially multimodal access. They would like to do more to get more community engagement in using bus, to using bicycle, to using other modes of transportation to get to the library. I thought that's great. And I would like the council, the municipal code actually allows the council to request the library commission to study this issue. So I hope to get a consensus from the council to allow the library commission to continue to work on this issue as one of their work program items. do I make a motion for this thing for now, or do I just get
If I could,
maybe
if I
a
could,
consensus?
if I could
It's not
just,
on the agenda,
Yeah.
so.
yeah, but if I could just make one clarification, and one of the reasons why I brought those two memos to light from the Library Commission is that, they did have some they had some good suggestions, and I think predominantly we included those suggestions in our recommendations. There's the issue with the diagonal parking. I know that was a suggestion, and our consultant can talk more about it if needed, but we had estimated that up to 36% decrease in the number of parking stalls would result in changing it to diagonal parking, and that would just be going the wrong direction. And reconfiguring the inside of the lot, I think with us being able to have a second book drop-off located on Torrey, it really hit a lot of the marks that was the spirit of the suggestions that were made by the commission. So I just please keep that in mind.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you for incorporating those comments. But I think they intend to be continued to be involved and help in the 2-year process for the traffic demand management program. So I think we could provide direction from the council that we would like the staff to work with Library Commission on this, right? That could be part of the direction of today. And then another clarification is, I'm a little confused. The $1 million that we allocated, I think that was discussed together with the library expansion, but it's separated from library expansion. So now the library expansion fund doesn't include any parking. And this part of $1 million is supposed to not only address the current parking demand issue, but also the goal will be address the future parking demand from the library expansion. Is that the right understanding?
Yeah, that's correct. And I had mentioned that expansion is anticipated to add 200 stalls, and if all these measures are implemented and reviewed for effectiveness over time, it's going to be around 235.
Yeah.
Is the benefit. But you are correct that the $1 million is for parking, and that is separate from the library expansion project.
That's great to clarify that. I see that the numbers match up, that your final goal match up the demand we will have from the library expansion.
Yeah, and the only caveat is
that we won't come back to have to allocate further funding for parking for library expansion, right? Just want to clarify that. And then the third, I think, Deb sent us a memo that reminds us we should follow the Roberts rule of city council meeting. So we should make a motion first before we start a discussion.
Rosenberg's
Rosenberg's rule is the one we are following. So I should make a motion. I'd like to make a motion to approve the staff recommendation for the actually, wait, this is on the action item, so I can make a motion. Do I make a motion?
They're seeking council input. So.
We are just providing input, right? So I don't need a motion. Okay, never mind. So I just want to say that work with the Library Commission on traffic demand management.
Okay.
Mayor Scharf, can I add something?
Sure. Who is this?
Diane Thompson, Assistant City Manager.
Sure.
I just wanted to respond to Councilmember Chow that I have been attending the Library Commission meetings and will continue to do so to give them updates on the library expansion project. And at the same time, it's easy to give them an update on the Civic Center parking and to gather input from them as well.
Right. So it's my understanding that we have taken the input from the Library Commission on this, but
yes,
necessarily it is a function of the Public Works Department.
So the problem was on July 1st, they took this item off their work program. And then when I talked to the staff, it seems there is some understanding that it's not their duty to advise the council on library access issue. So I want a clarification on that. I think this council does want our Library Commission to get involved now and in the future library access issue.
So just to provide some clarification on that, the parking at Civic Center is not part of the Library Commission's purview in accordance with the Muni Code. However, due to their interest in the project and the link in terms of access to the library, we did meet with them last January, talked about their suggestions, and as we've mentioned, we've incorporated most of their suggestions into the project. And going forward, as I said, we can certainly meet with them at their monthly meetings and provide updates on the parking programs that we implement, and we can get their feedback on how things are going. And things will change going forward. As the city manager said, flexibility is sort of a key component to what we're looking at with this 2-year planning horizon. And so certainly we'll be in conversation on a regular basis with the library commissioners and getting their comments on how the parking programs are going relative to the library. So certainly due to their interest, we will accommodate that.
That's not what I'm requesting. So you're talking about specifically only parking. I'm talking about traffic demand management. This involves user engagement. It involves the usage of the library. And the Library Commission has expertise in that when there is big peak usage, when we have events, so this is where we need their feedback. And I think we need them to be working together as a partner or leading some of the effort, not just as a body that receive presentation and provide comments at the end of a certain work that's done, and not just a body that receive only a report on parking. So my request is for the library to be enabled, the Library Commission to be enabled to lead some of the efforts in engaging the library users to take bus, to do safe biking, to do bike locking, maybe some activities to learn, like someone mentioned, maybe a prize that we are giving out bike locks. So enable them to be engaged in this as a partner in traffic demand management. So parking configuration, yes, they are not expert on that, they can provide comment, but we are not talking about just parking, right? And to achieve the goal, we need beyond parking. So do I have consensus on this direction to staff?
I agree that, I agree that anything we can do to bring more people into the discussion for which they have different knowledge, they have different connections. I mean, even the parking, if the Library Commission and the library really feels that their inputs are requested or wanted or helpful, then they're more likely to actually be surveying the patrons of the library and getting their input. What other modes of transportation would you consider using to get to the library? What other times of day would you consider using, the library to avoid the heavy congestion? Those are the types of things, if they feel that they're really part of the team. But if it's, just going to be a check-in with them from time to time, I think we lose their interest level of really trying to work to improve things. So I do think they should be a full-fledged partner in this. I would say that they are the biggest user of the parking in this area. So.
Okay, would anyone else like to speak? Rod? We've not heard from
Thank you. I suppose this isn't lost on anybody, but because we went ahead and approved the library expansion without implementing the Civic Center master plan, we now have a parking conundrum. So my primary input is let's get on with the Civic Center master plan and the expanded parking that project would afford. I think that's the right way to solve this problem. There's a lot of Band-Aids here, and I realize you can get a lot of things to add up for a lot of money, but I think we're avoiding actually the more important conversation that we need to have. As for mitigation measures, in the slide deck that I got prior to this meeting, I didn't see the final recommendation. Could that be put back up on the screen, Roger?
Well, we didn't really have a slide that summarized all the different recommendations, Councilman Sinks.
You had two specific things you were talking about doing that were one-time measures, right?
Yeah, we had two. That was slide number 5, if you could bring that up, Ted.
Okay.
Yeah, slide 5 had the physical improvements with one-time.
So what would are you recommending that we do these two things right now? Or are you just looking for any kind of input?
Well, yeah, what we've identified here and what I've covered in the presentations that is our recommendations. And I mean, aside from how Deb stated it being incremental and we'll just see what's going to make the most sense given the conditions that may present, these are the recommendations that we will implement as they make sense.
I mean, I think this, if we get to the price tag of, in the following slide 8, where you're talking about $201,000 per year of ongoing costs and all, I'm not in favor of spending this money. I would be in favor of doing something not on the slides that I heard several of members of the public talk about, which is consider bike lockers. If we are working hard on improving mobility and safety for bicycles with the current trail projects, it seems to me that owners of those expensive bikes, right, those e-bikes can run $3,000, ought to feel comfortable about leaving them securely at the Civic Center. So I would be in favor of thinking about how we enable that. What's that?
I'm sorry, Councilman Sinks. He had the slide there that showed the bike lockers as part of the measures.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I think that one to me makes a lot of sense. I don't see many motorcycles at City Hall. I'm interested in pickup drop-off at Torrey Avenue, but what does that mean? Does that mean that people park there very briefly and they run around to the book slot on the other side of the building?
No, there would be a physical drop-off, either at the curb on the passenger side, and we're looking at ways that we could design it to where it potentially could be on the driver's side, similar to going to the post office.
I think that makes a lot of sense. Have you discussed this idea with library administration? Would they be, they have a system right now that functions in the other end of the building where they have all kinds of conveyances and whatnot to facilitate automating that. Do they have thoughts about how a drop-off would work on Torrey?
I spoke with Claire yesterday. I don't know if Claire's available to speak on operations now. She'd be better suited than I.
Yeah, it sounds like a great idea because I agree with the speakers that, the congestion in the parking lot, it often is kind of a mess, right? It'd be nice if there was a way to just drive by Torrey and not have to go into the parking lot at all if all you wanted to do was drop off a book.
So Claire, are you still here?
I am here.
Great, welcome.
So good evening, Council and City staff. Claire Boresio, Community Librarian for Cupertino Library. And yes, I did speak with Roger yesterday, and I shared with him that on the library district side, one of the outcomes from the patron survey that we conducted in 2019, not related to parking, just our general patron survey, we did see an interest from respondents in having curbside drop-off points around the library property. So I think that having that drop-off location on Torrey is in line with what our patrons have already expressed to be a preference. Certainly, I don't know that we are prepared, or nor is the city, to implement the suggestion earlier of running our automated returns handling system from the street into the library building. I think that's just beyond our capabilities at this point, but we would be happy to explore a manual book return in that location.
I see. So basically it'd be a great big box, you drop your books in, and the library staff would then have to go collect them.
We would go out periodically, yes, during the day.
At some greater cost of labor to you, I guess, than normal, right?
We would build it into our operations. So we would need to look at it and figure out how we'd be able to make that work. But knowing that it's something that the community is interested in, I think it's something that we would be able to figure out.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah, I guess I appreciate all that. I'm supportive of building some drop-off on Torrey Avenue if the library would use it and manage it. I think that the big thing for me, aside from, yes, I think we should have bike lockers, I guess, that are available to patrons or anybody, I guess, any member of the public, but probably also with a time limit, right? It seems to me, because they're expensive to install, but I think, so in other words, we don't want just residents from across the street hogging the lockers indefinitely. But I do, it ought to have a time limit so that we're ensuring that patrons are using them for a reasonable time. And I think the bigger thing, though, is we need to get on with the rest of the Civic Center master plan. Thank you.
Okay, let's see, am I muted? Oh, Darcy, you have anything?
No, I think that it's a well thought out set of proposals. We're looking at the library expansion going online at the end of next year, latest beginning of 2022. So I think it's a very forward-looking plan. I will note that it is also very budget conscious for our current times, and it's not seeking to expend that $1 million in the upcoming calendar or fiscal year. I think it's thoughtful, and I'd really like to see how a TDM plan such as this one happens to work out. I think that staff has done a fairly good job in terms of the plan. The Library Commission did put in a good amount of work and thought into this. I would like to see some more substantive interactions between the Library Commission as well as our staff on this going forward. But I do support the proposal, and I appreciate staff's commitment to having that ongoing conversation. I don't think we necessarily need to make specific direction to make Library Commission an active decision-making stakeholder in the process. I feel good about what staff has done so far, and again, the suggestions I think are comprehensive, and they match the number of parking stalls that are going to be needed with regard to what our anticipated maximum needs are going to be. Insofar as the Civic Center Master Plan is concerned, I think that this does give us some options in the future as well. I don't know for certain what's going to happen with our current City Hall space. I don't know if we build a new building, make significant renovations, look into other top, possible opportunities around the city. I simply don't know. And so I don't think we should make it a foregone conclusion that there are going to be very significant infrastructural and capital changes and investments into the rest of the Civic Center Master Plan. But what we do know is that we have a project that may have a particular parking impact in these maximum requirement types of situations. And I commend staff for the work that they've done. And I just encourage them to go forward and interact with the community, not just through the Library Commission, but in terms of some of the other suggestions that were made, such as taking from their own data points with regard to community hall usage, as well as the library patrons themselves. And yes, it is legitimate, I think, to do so through the Library Commission. I'll make a note that under the municipal code, it does state that there are particular areas within the purview of the commission, but there's a catch-all at the end that states that, they can perform such other tasks as may be expressly requested of it by the city council. And so, for me, I'm not at the point where I would like to, kind of encode that in motion format. I think that the format so far has worked out largely well. So let's go forward with that and revisit it. If we hear from our commission and our community that they felt that they have really good points that haven't been brought forth and considered and processed by staff moving forward, let's revisit that possibility. Sure.
All right, great. Yeah, and I agree about the master plan. We'd love to do something about the situation at City Hall, but given the current budget constraints, unless some of our efforts to find funding for that, that's not going to be something that gets done before the library expansion. So we're going to have to do something about the parking in the meantime. Let's see, who is not calling yet? John, do you have anything? Okay, I guess not. Okay.
Yes.
Oh, there you are. Okay.
Took me a second there. Could, Roger, could you put back that top view of Community Hall there? The top view in your slide deck?
Yes. Ted, that is slide number 3.
Is it coming up or?
Yep, it should be. Slide 3, Ted.
So, yeah.
Go back to 3, Ted. Ted, it's the site plan with the map, number 3.
It was there a minute ago.
There it goes.
Okay, there you go.
That's it. Leave it right there, Ted.
Yeah. So, I did like what the resident said about, potentially making that one entrance on the south side, one direction with parking on both sides. Did you explore it in the sense of, is the existing curb roadway sufficient if it was just one way and the other direction was diagonal parking? Or would you need to encroach somewhat on the sidewalk, say 4 feet? And then how many parking spaces would that generate? Did you look at that? I mean, I'm just real curious to kind of see that we turn over all the rocks that we can.
Yes.
Some of that, Roger. This is
go ahead.
city engineer. The width of the existing pavement is not necessarily adequate to provide for diagonal parking. There would need to be some encroachment either to the north into the area where the Grove is, or to the south into the area where Library Field is. We are not proposing any modifications to either the Grove or the Field at this point in time, but that encroachment would be somewhere around 10 feet to get single one-way access as well as diagonal parking on both sides. I don't know exactly how many stalls that would be, but you would need to do some physical improvements and there would be some green space taken away.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't be, we'd lose other spaces if we went everything diagonal. Is that true in Zone C? If the idea was to make everything diagonal and have some kind of a loop?
Yeah, it was in the neighborhood of about a 1/3 loss of the stalls to reconfigure.
Okay.
So, if staff could, do a back of the envelope, I'm not suggesting, a significant study, but, firm up how much encroachment would it be, if the existing road width in each direction, Chad, maybe is 8 feet?
Are you talking in a two-way configuration?
Just an egress road for the vehicle in one direction. Isn't each direction about 8 feet?
Yeah, but for an area where you're trying to facilitate diagonal parking, it needs to be wider to allow for adequate space for cars to back out of those positions. So it's not typically.
I got you. Yep, I understand. Now, if they were, slightly diagonal spots, Mayor Sharp says you'd lose something. Well, by doing the domino effect, and so you shift them all, by one stall's worth, yeah, you'd lose one stall, but on the back of an envelope, how many stalls would we gain along the other direction? Because I just see parking is always going to be a real challenge. And so, if this would work, I realize the next thing is, how would it affect flow? Is it going to work for people to only enter in the south entrance and only exit in the north entrance exit? What's your feeling in terms of, would that work, or would it just really clog?
Yeah, I have some suspicions there's some just egress issues. If Ben Huey, our traffic consultant, if you could speak up on this point, Ben?
Yes, Ben. I think the speaker previously, when they wrote up or drew up that diagram, it also shown that the Zone B that's shown here would also be diagonal parking, and it would essentially require a one-way direction going, I believe it was northbound, so to the north. And I believe the northern entrance near that number 19, they actually had it as two-way ingress and egress. And I think there would be circulation issues, because if you had someone that entered in from the north, say Zone A, they can't get past the Zone B or Zone C or Zone D. And so they're essentially kind of cut off from the rest of the parking lot. And so I believe that there would be circulation issues if we had diagonal parking in the majority of this parking lot.
Yeah. So I really don't want to cause a problem, but I think it would at least be good to have explored that. You don't have to go into a lot of detail when you present it to us, but enough to know that, wow, we really did turn over that rock. It would give this many stalls, but it would cause these types of circulation issues. And then we can sleep at night knowing that we did the due diligence of looking at that. Once we look at that type of change, that may inspire a couple other thoughts, but they kind of accumulate as you go, what the possible options are. So I'll leave it at that. The other one I'll bring up is, so it appears that you're talking about two of the lockable bike cabinets, right?
This is Ben. I wanted to make
No.
Yeah, I want to make a clarification. It wasn't two bike lockers. It was 10 spaces. Just in the table with regards to the parking benefits, it only resulted in two vehicle parking spaces being added. And that was based off of the employee survey that we had sent out that essentially said that, if secure bicycle parking were added, it would result in 1% of employees shifting to a bicycle mode as opposed to vehicle mode. So it's not that we're proposing only two spaces of bicycle parking. It's only going to result in two vehicle spaces.
So that's good. But then, again, the more we kind of touch on these things, the more ideas come up. So you were looking at it, 1% of employees using bicycles if they had a locker to put them in. But how about the patrons? I mean,
yeah, I think that specific measure. Go ahead, Roger.
No, you go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, that specific measure, as staff had told me, was that the City Hall was going to implement bicycle lockers, and that was essentially meant for the employees. So that was our understanding. I did not specifically look at
bicycle parking for the patrons.
Yeah,
And
so
that,
that's kind of
measure.
where I'm going. I mean, the library is one type of place that's going to attract a huge number of underage people, which their mode of transportation, walk, bike, or get a lift from somebody. So with that being said, on the library, on the west side of the building, I'm kind of going at it from, if I was just thinking about just the library, just the patrons and bicycles, to what degree do I think there'd be how many bicycles would patrons likely be using during, the normal days? And I would say 15 or 20. And is it not possible to put 15 or 20 bike lockers along the west side of the library? I mean, I walk that sidewalk, I usually park out on Torrey and walk that sidewalk, and it just kind of seems like, of course, we don't want to just clutter and put stuff everywhere, but it does seem like, a nice row of lockers along there would be possible. And if we're talking 15 or 20 bike lockers, and we do got to be concerned that the tenants across the street might tend to like that and park their bikes in there. But I think as long as we have tokens from the library to use those, then you pretty much wind up with only the library patrons being able to do that on a regular basis. So can we look at putting bike lockers along the west side of the library and 15, 20, 25?
Yes. In fact, the lockers that staff had intended, there was going to be a minimum of 10, and they would be near the vicinity of the library. I think Chad knows the exact location. I think it would be even more convenient than the west side, Councilman Willie. And these aren't just your typical stainless steel boxes. They're going to be sort of an app-based, very easy to use, secure, and at a minimum, that's going to be going in. And we are looking at because it is it's not just because it generates additional stalls, but there's also the need for the type of folks who are using the library of putting in even more. So we would definitely look at that.
Yeah. So great. Those are my questions. I would ask though that I would really be interested to know, more of an answer on those ones, at some point, so that again, I can feel that, boy, we really did explore all these. The west side bike lockers, as many as you could get in there, and then what would happen if you were to do more of the one-way traffic, and how many stalls would we potentially get? So, okay.
Well, I think, Roger, you already told us how many stalls we would lose if we did that, right? Didn't you say?
Well, for the diagonal, I did. The idea of making that zone D one way, I just don't see that being practical or working just because.
Right. So the drawing we saw though was not just zone D; it was making all of zone C diagonal parking and having a loop. So each row was one way, and I think you said you lose a certain amount of spaces when you do that.
That's correct. It was about a third, and that was not a diagram written by Public Works. That came from outside.
Right. So I just wanted to not have this idea out there that doing that one way and the diagonal gains us spaces, because it really loses us spaces.
Correct.
Okay. Let me go back to participants and. Does
Mr.
anyone
Mayor?
else have their, do you have some? Okay, I see, Leong, you have your hand raised.
Yeah. So, could you clarify, with the current recommended plan, what's the number of physical stalls that will be created?
Well, if we were to implement all of them.
You proposed a very, very long comprehensive list
Yeah.
of things. Thank you.
Well, if
It's
you
a bit
implement
confusing.
well, so if you implement them all, and of course we just don't know what's going to happen COVID-19, but if none of that had happened, and if we were to implement them all, it was estimated to be 235.
But that's equivalent. So how many number of physical space will be created?
Well, we're not building more parking stalls,
So
so
we
it's
are
all,
not adding any new
that's correct.
space at all. So all 200 something will be just traffic demand management to reduce demand of.
Yeah, I mean, we're
So we
converting one
expect
stall.
to reduce demand of 200 something cars.
That's right. We're converting a stall to motorcycle scooters, but yeah, we're not creating more parking stalls physically.
Okay.
Oh,
And in terms of, okay,
Roger, what about along Torrey? All the parallel parking spaces seem extremely long. I mean, is there any way to restripe those to have some compact spaces, or, you know?
There is some opportunities there that they are about 18 feet. So we could do something there, maybe eke out one or two more stalls, Mayor.
Right. Yeah. I mean, when I was measuring, I thought, God, we could probably get, another 3 spaces by restriping. Maybe it's only 2. I don't
or
know.
maybe like diagonal parking on zone E here at the bottom.
Yeah,
I think Rodriguez is pretty wide, right? Is it possible to do diagonal parking there?
On Rodriguez?
I don't
Not
believe
Rodriguez, that's Pacifica.
Yeah, you're talking about Pacifica there.
Yeah, at the very bottom.
Yeah, I'd have to look at what the parking situation would be on the south side, because you would have to shift traffic over to do that. So it may eliminate parking on the south side.
Shift parking, what do you mean?
Right. Yeah, that's
Well,
a
the center line would
possibility.
have to move south, and you may not have enough width to have a through lane and parking.
Okay, yeah. So then, so with $1 million, we are not looking at adding any parking, but we are funding a traffic demand program for 2 years. So I think we have enough for what? How many years?
It's not $1 million. He's proposing, the slide showed they're spending about a little over $500,000 over 2 years.
Yeah, so 1 million probably would fund 4 years, but we are trying for 2 years and see, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And in terms of bike lockers, I see that in the staff report, the recommendation was 2 on the City Hall side. That was for staff. So you are also recommending about 10 on the library side, right? For bike locker.
Well, I know we've installed some bike lockers at City Hall fairly recently there by the employee parking lot. So in my mind, these new bike lockers are going to be to serve the library patrons.
Okay. So I think there was one public comment, either written or oral, that this study focused a lot more on employee parking need, less on the library patron parking need, and especially on event parking needs. So I think going forward, I hope that we take into account of both. And also for event parking would be certain big event on weekday nights or on weekends. So these are things that we do need to think about, because a lot of times weekend parking is already tight. And when there is a big event, especially after we have library expansion, how do we handle all that? Then we will have visitors from elsewhere who will know all the traffic demand management we have, because this would apply, usually would be our residents, regular users who know what alternatives are there. But when you have event, you will bring in visitors from elsewhere. Then how do we handle that parking? So I think we still need to think about that. The option of maybe using Eaton, yes, maybe there will be fees involved, but if that some option we have to do when we have both community halls and the library community rooms booked. Maybe that's something we have to consider, okay?
Just want to point out,
And-
there's lots of street parking, and one of the library commissioners pointed this out before. There's street parking on Pacifica, on Whitney Way, on Farallon. It's just, it seems
To
like, if
accommodate
you're-
200 more people?
yeah, and it's closer than Eaton. You know, the problem is people don't want to walk all the way
Okay.
there. And, you know, it's
That's
just
true.
gonna have to get used to it, I think.
Yeah, get used to San Francisco parking, right?
Well, no, we're not doing that.
No,
There's
just-
also parking on Rodriguez,
It's better to
I've
park
seen.
2 blocks away.
Mr. Mayor, I just want to
Yeah.
remind you of the time. It's after.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. So one more thing is, I think Darcy said that he would like the library commission to be involved at the same level as they are involved now. I think the library commission on this project, they have been pretty involved. So he'd like that level of involvement to continue, right? And
Yeah,
as
that's
I
what he
understand, this presentation was not presented to the library commission yet. So please don't dial back the partnership and involvement the staff currently has with the library commission, because that has been working well. Thank you.
Okay, John, did I forget to lower your hand, or did you have something else to say? Okay.
No,
guess
I was done, sorry.
Okay. All right, so we have, I believe we are done with that presentation then. And the staff has our feedback. And let's see, we were supposed to be at 8:25 and we are at 9:05. So we have been going for 2 hours now. So why don't we take a few minutes and then proceed with item 3, the report on committee assignments. So let's reconvene at 9:10.